We've got the battle of the backups in week number 3 of the 2025 NFL season, and it's slated to be a great game. The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show starts right now.
It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 3 of the NFL season is here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Allstreicher of Locked On Ravens, and from the primetime game of Chiefs and Giants to the big 4:25 and 4 o'clock matchup between the Broncos and the Chargers, and why that battle of the backups between the Bengals and the Vikings matters this week. We're going to go game by game to make you the most informed fan for game day with the help of our local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to remind and tell everyone that today's edition of the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now, let's start with a look at the 1 p.m. slate of games. And kicking us off this week, it is the Minnesota Vikings and the Cincinnati Bengals. You might be saying, Kevin, it's backups. Joe Burrow's out. J.J. McCarthy's out. What are you talking about? But this game is still massively important. You have Jake Browning, who led the Bengals to a win over the Jaguars in week 2, filling in for Joe Burrow. And that Minnesota Vikings team, they're going to look to go to 2-1. The Bengals right now are undefeated. And hopefully for the Bengals, Joe Burrow can return within a couple of months. For the Vikings, J.J. McCarthy, hopefully back sooner rather than later. So it's up to these backups to keep their teams afloat with incredible skill position players around them. So Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings and James Rapien of Locked On Bengals, get you ready for game time.
Let's move on, James, with this Locked On Vikings, Locked On Bengals crossover. So I don't know how familiar Bengals fans are, if how many of you your Bengals fans are also listening to Locked On NFL, but there is a Locked On NFL show twice a day. And I go on there Wednesday mornings with Tyler Rowland. And we spent a lot of the offseason monitoring what was going on with the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson and just the look of that defense, how much it struggled last year and how a lot of the same guys were run back. And then they had that rough preseason start. We're going, oh no, here we go again with the Bengals defense. But it appears that the Bengals defense it played pretty well against the Browns. It's just the Browns. Mm-hmm. The Jaguars moved the ball a little better on them. What is the vibe around the Bengals defense right now? I genuinely think this is a huge key to the game, is how much can they execute versus a Vikings offense that has not been able to execute. But if they get it together, they have a ton of talent. Would the Bengals be able to keep up?
Yeah, I think it's such a huge question. And I thought you were about to set me up to brag on the Bengals defense just for Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen and TJ Hawkinson to take him down the peg on Sunday, which could happen. Right. And I think no, but that's what's so interesting. Like my fantasy team that has Justin Jefferson on it, it's kind of painful the first couple of weeks. You know, it hasn't delivered necessarily the way you'd want. And I think for the Bengals defense, like it's been encouraging, but during both of these games, there's been times and in moments where you're like, same old Bengals defense. They're the same as last year. They may be worse than last year. And then they have an interception. Opportunistic interception, or they get a stop, or they find a way to get off the field. And there's been at least 3 different drives in the past 2 weeks that were aided by drops, but those drops have happened. And so I don't really know which way to go. Is luck just on their side? Are they better than last year? I will say this, they need anyone to consistently generate pressure that isn't Trey Hendrickson. And that's been a huge issue when they've given up a bunch of yards. And Joe Flacco's going up and down the field at times and stretches in week 1. And Trevor Lawrence almost put them up 14-0. And then Trey Hendrickson got pressure and threw the ball right to Dax Hill. It was an easy interception for Dax. And it gave the Bengals some momentum the other day and kind of turned the game around a bit. So they've been able to force those kind of plays and create those plays. But during that early stretch, you're like, is this defense just the same as it's always been? And so that's why I stopped short, even with Carson Wentz, because you may look up and it's 14-0 Vikings, and it's because this Vikings offense is moving the ball up and down the field, and the Bengals didn't force that turnover that they've done in each of the past couple of games.
Yeah, this is the scenario that is like kind of, you alluded to it earlier, where like the Bengals defense struggles and the Vikings move the ball really easy, and then everybody's suddenly going, oh my God, we've been playing the wrong quarterback. That would be an extremely annoying narrative that will probably get really prevalent, but I think everybody in the building understands this is a backup that'll be, and that McCarthy would be back theoretically after the bye. Even if things go well against a defense that is like very maligned. So let's walk with me a little bit here.
Let's walk.
The Bengals, if they are getting lucky, let's say it's just totally unsustainable and it's really just been buoyed by drops and they're actually not playing that well. Mm-hmm. What is the issue there? I mean, it's not the names we know, right? It's not Trey Hendrickson. He ain't the issue. What is the way that people have been attacking this Bengals defense?
Well, it would be that they don't have enough talent in the trenches to get regular pressure. And I think Dax Hill's their best member of the secondary, but they don't have any stars in the secondary right now. And so that would be the argument. And that linebacker, they're young outside of Logan Wilson. Like, I don't think that there's any gigantic glaring, oh my goodness, holes right now outside of pass rush. But that's obviously a huge, huge void, and something that they got some from down the stretch out of BJ Hill in week 1. But you're like, there's no, the reason why Javon Hargrave would have been so intriguing here is because you just don't have that consistently. And that's such a nice thing to have when you have Trey Hendrickson commanding a bunch of attention. You throw in the fact that Shamar Stewart is doubtful this week. He's out this week. He's not going to play. And he was disruptive. He doesn't have a sack yet, but he was disruptive, and you lose him. And so now it's on Joseph Osai and Miles Murphy and some of these other guys that have either underachieved, been injured throughout their career, or both, that the Bengals are relying on to get pressure. And if they don't get pressure, then Carson Wentz should be able to find someone open, because it's going to be hard to guard all of the Vikings' weapons for 3.5 seconds, 4 seconds.
Yeah, it's tough on the back end. One thing that you should be aware of, the Vikings don't have Christian Darrisaw yet. He's still coming off of the ACL injury and MCL injury that he suffered last year. We're kind of right in that range where it's about time where guys would come back from that kind of injury. We're at that 9-10 month range of recovery. So he's kind of week to week. It's been Justin School. He's been a disaster. I mean, he's been a total catastrophe. You've probably seen it on prime time. Now Justin School has a concussion, and it's the guy who is backing up him, Walter Rouse, who's a second-year dude out of Oklahoma, who I actually kind of liked in the preseason. I thought he actually had a pretty reasonable start, but he was not in front of Justin School, who was struggling quite a bit. And either we find out that the Vikings made a big depth chart mistake there and maybe cost themselves a couple of plays early in the season, or that the guy who's backing up the bad guy is even worse than the bad guy. But I'm if I'm the Bengals, I mean, like, I'm looking at Trey Hendrickson and I'm looking at the third stringer over there at left tackle, and I'm drooling.
Yeah, no doubt.
Michael B. Jordan and Sinners.
And I need to see that, by the way. I haven't
sorry.
seen it. No, it's okay. I haven't
spoiled a little.
It's no spoiler. It's fine. Look,
I
that
didn't
is
tell
a
you which.
matchup.
It's
If they win the game, he has to dominate that matchup. There's been times where I've thought that going into games, like he went up against Fred Johnson last year. It's like, you got to win this matchup. It's against the Eagles, and he didn't. He didn't really win it. And those are the type of matchups. Those are the type of games where you need Trey Hendrickson to be just a terror. And so if he's that, well, then this defense is probably going to make some plays and create some chaos and force some turnovers. If not, I don't know where else that comes from. And maybe Al Golden has a wrinkle or two that he hasn't thrown out there, but they're going to have to find a way, especially without Shamar Stewart, to do that.
Yeah, and you have to like chip him, right? Like you have to. I mean, that's if I'm the Vikings, like I'm
yes,
very aware of where he is every play, and I'm throwing a chip at him. I'm doubling him. I'm sliding toward him, like help, and then everybody else has to be one-on-one. And
I'm fine with one-on-one everywhere as long as Trey has 2 guys on him. That's how I feel if I was Minnesota. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, who's the most likely guy to step up then and be that dude?
I would say Joseph Osai at defensive end, because we've seen it. We've seen him have the flashes. He's had the moments. Last year, he ended the year well. He's someone that, and he signed a 1-year deal He's in his 5th season. This is very much a prove it year, and this could be a prove it game for him where he kind of busts out. So yeah, Joseph Osai would be the one that I would look at and say, all right, man, this is your time. And if he can win one-on-one, then who knows? Maybe they finally get some pressure that they've been waiting on. But honestly, look, we've been waiting on it and waiting on it and waiting on it from all these guys. It's not just Joseph. I'm not singling him out.
Yeah, I'm familiar enough with a lot of the like Miles Murphy type situations that you got going on in Cincinnati that, fans are not so happy with. Well, let's get down to brass tacks. On FanDuel, as I am looking at this, maybe it has changed by the time you're listening to this, dear listener, but right now the Vikings are favored by 3 at home. Yep. Minus 105 or minus 115 for the Bengals +3. So the money slightly edging toward the Bengals. Over-unders at 42.5. How do you feel about that line? I don't like making predictions. I just don't really want to do it. It's just not a fun game. I'm not a power rankings guy or anything like that. But I do like to look at the betting lines and just kind of figure out how the world feels about this, which I do every week on Fridays, by the way, if Bengals fans want to check it out. But how do you feel about that?
Oh, it's a tough one. And it was like minus 1.5 in favor of the Vikings before Joe got hurt and before they played their week 2 game, before the Vikings did. And then it went up to, I think, minus 5.5. And now it's come down a little bit and it's been going back. I think you lean home team here. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just my initial thought. You already said we're recording on Tuesday. Could feel differently by Thursday. But like, it's a tough turnaround. Both teams are shorthanded. One's at home. One's coming off of an awful loss, and I think is well coached. And so I would expect the Vikings to respond naturally, even if Joe were playing. And so without Joe, even though the Vikings are shorthanded, like you mentioned, I think it's going to be a tough game for the Bengals. I had this as a win coming into the season. I had the Bengals starting 3-0, and so maybe I just stick with that anyway. But just spread wise, I think it's tough to take the Bengals in this spot, given Jake Browning starting at quarterback.
I think it's kind of nuts to me how close that FanDuel feels Joe Burrow and JJ McCarthy are in value. Like the loss of both of those guys only moving the line 1.5 points toward the Vikings feels like a big underreaction to me. Mm-hmm. But maybe the markets just believe in Jake Browning a little bit more than I thought they would.
Maybe.
Either way, or I guess in spite of that, I kind of feel like the Bengals are being underrated here. I think we're doing the thing where two like down in the dumps podcasters who have dealt with a lot of bad news in the last 2 days pick the other team in the crossover. But I kind of feel like the problems that were exhibited in that Atlanta game were more concerning than just an off night. And I'm not really willing to dismiss them maybe as much as like FanDuel is. So I do think that the Bengals are a little underrated there, but we'll see. We'll see where everything goes. And obviously, I mean, with these two quarterbacks, this game probably gets decided on some weird lucky crap. Like some stupid thing is going to happen that sort of makes all these little like marginal things about what are you doing, who's chipping who, like not matter as much. So I don't know.
Yeah, I expect an entertaining game. I expect it to be chaotic, back and forth, and I do think there will be some big swings. I just lean the home team as of today.
You can check out Luke over at Locked On Vikings and James over at Locked On Bengals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up next, don't look now. The Indianapolis Colts are rolling at 2-0. They pick up a last-second win over the Denver Broncos in week 2. Meanwhile, the Tennessee Titans are still feeling things out with Cam Ward at the helm. And we have Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts, plus Tyler Rowland of Locked On Titans. They're going to get you ready with everything you need to know in a pivotal AFC South matchup.
All right, Jake, let's cap off today's Week 3 crossover Thursday. One of 2 that we'll be doing this year in a division crossover. But we've talked about the big storylines. We've talked about some matchups that we're looking for. Now we need to talk about what ultimately will decide this game. And, Jake, I got to tell you, I think it's the run game. I think for both teams, That's what it boils down to. The Colts have run all over the Titans recently. The Titans have held up strong against the run early in games, but their competitive stamina has dropped late in games. And I think it gets tougher for the Titans defense in the second half because the Titans offense falls off a cliff. And now you're out there more, longer drives, less breaks and all of that. But with Daniel Jones being so good in play action so far this year and Tyler Warren being such a valuable threat over the middle of the field, if the Colts are able to run the ball with success early in the game, that's only going to open up that play action more. It's going to bite the linebackers in. It's going to bring the safeties down. Warren's going to have more space over the middle. So I think if the Titans don't stop the run for the Colts, they're letting the game be on easy mode for Daniel Jones. I think if you're the Titans, you want to make Daniel Jones beat you with precision. You want to make him slice and dice you, long drives, consistent execution, and see if he makes a mistake, which he has in his career. He hasn't in the first couple of weeks with the Colts, but throughout his career, he has made mistakes if you give him too many opportunities. But you're not going to be able to do that if you don't stop the run and set up third and long and third and medium situations. And then likewise with the Titans offense, they had a ton of success in play action opportunities last week, even though Brian Callahan only called it 19%. Why are we only running 19% play action when you're having so much success with it? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But if the Titans don't run the ball and set themselves up, and the Titans so far, Jake, have had the longest third down yards to gain of any team in the NFL. Like, their third downs are harder and more difficult. And when you have a rookie quarterback and you maybe don't have the most dynamic wide receiver group of all time and you have an offensive line that's struggling, all that, long third downs is just the worst thing that you could possibly hear. So for me, everything about this game is the run game, whether it's Titans defense, Titans offense, doesn't matter. The run game is everything.
Yeah, no, getting ahead of the sticks would be huge. From the Colts perspective, I just got a big red circle over Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren. Those are two guys that just do so much. They're creating all their own plays. Now, the offensive line is doing their part, of course, but Jonathan Taylor has become a true 3-down back. Like, we all know him as this workhorse running back, but he's catching the ball really well this year, and he has stepped up big time in pass protection. So he's kind of created a need for him to never leave the field. And that's a guy who is one of the most explosive players in football, never has to go off the field now. So he's been huge. Tyler Warren, I mentioned, he could take these 3-4 yard catches and add a bunch more yardage to him. He's getting downfield. He's hitting those corner routes, had that beautiful sail route out of the backfield that I'm sure we all saw by now last week. So Warren and Taylor have been, I think, the biggest X factors and creators for this offense so far. And the offensive line's got to hold up, obviously. Jeffrey Simmons versus Quentin Nelson is always must-see TV.
Prime time. Yeah.
Everyone loves that matchup. I'm sure those two guys absolutely hate each other, but we all are better as football fans for getting to see it. So that's huge. And then the pass rush. It would be really beneficial for the Colts if they were not the get-right game for Tennessee's protection and their offensive line. I don't know what the injuries are going to look like. Two of the three most important defenders for the Colts were out last week, and you got to hope at least one of them is back because, Cam Ward is a creator. They had their hands full last week with Bo Nix, who I think is someone who's somewhat similar. He's not just a distributor. He's able to escape pressure, roll out, get out of the pocket, and do some unique things to keep the play alive. And I think Cam Ward is the exact same way. And I think he's a little more willing to sit back there and hold on to the ball until something develops, which I'm sure gets him in trouble from time to time. But, yeah, the Colts cannot just have 5 pressures and no hits in this game. Like, one of the big reasons teams are having success against Tennessee is creating chaos for Ward in the backfield. So the Colts have to be part of that as well. I think it was probably good for Lou Anarumo to see a game like last week already in the season, so he can kind of adjust accordingly. You don't want Xavier Howard to necessarily be your top cornerback. I thought if it was going to continue rolling downhill like that, we might see more of Jonathan Edwards, who's a rookie undrafted free agent. But at the time, that's how bad it was for Howard. I think if I remember correctly, it was like 8 of 8 targets. He had 3 penalties. It was a genuinely horrid performance. And so is a rookie undrafted free agent really going to give you much worse than that? So if Howard keeps rolling downhill, I would hope they maybe bring someone else in to stop the bleeding a little bit. So I want to see some defensive adjustments, and I really want to see Taylor and Warren leading the offense again.
Yeah, just to add some numbers to what you're saying, the Titans gave up 28 pressures to the Broncos in week 1 and then 23 pressures to the Los Angeles Rams. So Colts fans, if you don't get more than 5 pressures, it definitely gives you your answer about the pass rush. The last thing I got to say is the penalties for the Titans. The Titans are last in the NFL right now in penalties. They've had 28 flags thrown on them, 23 of them accepted. 9 have been pre-snap penalties from the offensive line just not being locked in. They've given up a net negative 119 yards. They have lost 119 yards to their opponents through penalties. That's the most in the league by 20 yards. So if the Titans go out there and have another double-digit penalty game at home, they're 100% going to lose. And once again, all eyes on Brian Callahan, because in my opinion, you could go through each individual penalty and subscribe it to the player, but once the pattern has been established, then it becomes a coaching problem that all over the roster guys can't fix that. So those are the things that we're going to be looking for.
Be sure you check out Jake over at Locked On Colts and Tyler over at Locked On Titans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The New York Jets and Tampa Bay Buccaneers take on each other in week number 3. Now, Justin Fields not going to play in this one for the Jets. He is out, but Baker Mayfield, he is going to continue, hopefully for the Bucs' sake, to ball, because he has been incredible as their quarterback. And James Yarko of Locked On Bucs and John Butchko of Locked On Jets talk key storylines, keys to victory, and so much more.
Wrapping things up here on a crossover Thursday, and this crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I am James Yarko, host of Locked On Bucs. He is John Butchko, host of Locked On Jets. And let's get into it, John. You know, what do the Jets need to do to win this game?
My first key for the Jets is shorten the game. And I think that means that, first of all, they'll have to run the ball effectively. And as you mentioned, that's not going to be an easy task against this Tampa Bay defense. But this is an offense that's first and foremost built on the run game. And that's going to be true whether Justin Fields is a quarterback or whether Tyrod Taylor's a quarterback. With Fields, the run game is an important part of what he brings to the table. If Taylor's in there, well, you're playing your backup quarterback, which means you can't put everything in his hands. So I think that it's important to shorten the game. First of all, run the ball effectively. But second of all, I think that they need to run the play clock down between plays. Now, you hear that a lot when there's a matchup that seems like a mismatch on paper. And usually that's the recipe you get for the team that's the underdog. And I don't know that that's always the case. That's always the best analysis, because essentially if you're shortening the game, that means like you need to put together a lot of like 10-play scoring drives. If you're the less talented team, putting together like 10 straight good plays against a more talented opponent is easier said than done. But I think that there's another factor in this game. And the schedule makers, I think, did the Jets a lot of favors. But one thing that they did that was not so great for the Jets was they scheduled this trip to Florida in September, because it's still really hot in Florida this time of year. And I checked the weather before we started recording. It's supposed to be a day where the heat index is over 100. And this is not a Jets team with a lot of depth. And that's particularly true on the defensive line. On the defensive line, the Jets really only have 3 good players: Quinnen Williams, Will McDonald, and Jermaine Johnson. And it gets really thin after that. Their number 3 defensive end is Michael Clemens, whose only real contribution this year, and I'm not saying this to be sarcastic, his only real contribution this year was a roughing the passer penalty against Josh Allen through the first 2 games that extended the Buffalo scoring drive. He's not been on the stat sheet, no tackles, no sacks, no pressures, even though he's seen a heavy snap total so far this year. So the Jets just can't afford to get into a game where the Bucs are running a lot of snaps, because they're going to have to rotate defensive linemen. And when they rotate defensive linemen, they get into trouble. Week 1, there were a couple of times where Aaron Rodgers caught the Jets with backup defensive linemen on the field, and he went no huddle, so they could not substitute. And Pittsburgh produced some big plays there, just because the Jets don't have the depth that they had 2 or 3 years ago on the defensive line. So I think, if we're talking about playing holistic football, Jets need to shorten this game. Jets need to have some long offensive series, run the ball effectively, and run that play clock down between snaps.
Yeah, and I will say, as frustrated as Bucs fans get over it, the Bucs are going to be in white uniforms. They're wearing their 1976 throwback, so it's the white uniforms with the creamsicle numbers. It's going to get real hot that temperature differential between the lighter jerseys and the darker jerseys is a very, very real thing. And if you're not used to that heat and that humidity, it's going to be a long day, especially since I'm sure the Bucs are not going to go out of their way to provide any kind of shade or shelter like they will on their own sidelines. For the Bucs offensively, it's about picking your spots. You didn't give Baker any time at all in the pocket against Houston, so don't think that you can stand up and give him all day to sit back there and throw. You have to pound the rock with Bucky and Rashad. Even sprinkle in some Sean Tucker, but just keep running. That will not only control the clock and keep that defense on the field much, much longer and wear them down, and that's going to make them more susceptible later in games. That's when you can really start to let it fly off of play action. Look for Ibuka and Shep and Otten and Cam. I think this is a game where Bucs fans are going to get frustrated with Evans' usage. I'm going to assume that Sauce is going to follow him everywhere. But the respect that he commands, not just from a single corner, but from the defense as a whole, has opened things up for Emeka Ibuka early on this season. I expect that to continue. Defensively, you have to figure out how to get this pass rush going. There was a golden opportunity against Houston and their makeshift offensive line, and it took half the game before the pressure started to close in on CJ Stroud. The team finished with 3 sacks, but Stroud was able to sit in the pocket for what seemed like forever and find open guys. If Fields plays, of course, he is a massive threat to run the ball, so you have to stay disciplined, which is not something that they have done well the first 2 weeks against Penix and Stroud in terms of allowing them to run through the second level of the defense. Yancey is out. It's on Greg Gaines and rookie 5th-round pick Elijah Roberts to step up. I love seeing the blitzes from Tyke Smith and Levante David and Benjamin Morrison last week, but they have to create more pressure and more sacks from their natural pass rush, and that means Hassan Reddick, who's going to be hyped for this one, as well as Yaya Diaby.
So I have another key for the Jets, and this might sound basic, but the Jets need to clean up their mistakes on defense. I think that most objective observers watching this game would conclude Tampa Bay is the better team. And if Tampa Bay plays its A game and the Jets play their A game, the Buccaneers are probably going to win. What the Jets cannot do is hand gifts to the Buccaneers, because the Jets' defense has done that the first 2 weeks. Against Pittsburgh week 1, most of the big plays the Steelers created were off busted coverages. And week 2 against the Bills offense played pretty well, particularly in the run game, but guys were messing up run fits. The Jets were not making tackles. Guys were overrunning the ball. And, I said this at the start of the show, that these are the types of things Aaron Glenn was brought in to clean up, and they have not been cleaned up at all. And I think one of the most disturbing things is that a lot of the guys the Jets brought in this offseason, the new members of the team, have been culprits in the mistakes that they've made. It's one thing to lose because the other guy outperformed you. It's another to lose because you're handing them easy plays. And that's something the Jets have done too frequently the first 2 games. And, I don't know how they do it. You just hope that the coaches have been able to drill it into them in practice this week, that these mistakes, these unforced errors need to be eliminated.
Yeah, the one that comes to the top of my mind is you go back to the James Cook touchdown run last week when he should have been hit for a loss. Then he should have been tackled for no gain, and instead he's 44 yards, a cloud of dust, and a touchdown in the blink of an eye. So Bucs fans are hoping that Bucky and or Rashad are able to find some space like that in this one. But John, we've talked about the injuries, we've talked about the matchups. What kind of prediction do you have for this one?
All right, so I'm not predicting the final score. Here's my prediction: is that Aaron Glenn's not going to tell us who the starting quarterback is until Sunday, because if you go back to week 1, the Jets nominally had a center competition between Josh Myers and Joe Tippmann in training camp. And Glenn did not even reveal the results of that company. He did not tell us who was starting at center in week 1. And like that was going to make a difference to how the Steelers were going to attack that game. And the irony is, because of Elijah Vera Tucker's injury that week, they both started. Tippmann moved to right guard and Myers started at center. At the quarterback position, there actually is reason for the Jets to withhold this information, because I think you would see 2 very different styles between Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor. They both have the ability to run the ball, but Taylor, particularly in his mid-30s, is not a guy you're going to design a lot of runs for the way you would with Fields, whereas Taylor, I think, is going to be a more effective guy on a play-to-play basis as a passer. And there are a lot of Jets fans who want Taylor to start this game because Fields was so bad on Sunday. And I think that the floor is higher with Taylor in there. Taylor will not miss the easy passes Fields missed against Buffalo. But I just don't think the Jets have enough explosive players on offense to make it work with Tyrod. I think that in order to get the splash plays that you need to win, you need Fields in there. So I have a tough time seeing the Jets winning this game if Tyrod Taylor plays quarterback. If Justin Fields plays quarterback, it could be a disaster like it was against Buffalo, but it also could be a good Justin Fields game. And if it's a good Justin Fields game, the Jets have a puncher's chance.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Justin Fields gives you a chance to win in any game. It's a different style, but I equate it to Jameis Winston. You can have Jameis go out there and win a game he absolutely is not supposed to, but he's also the kind of quarterback that'll lose you a game that you're not supposed to. So, I can absolutely see that, because that is, a very different team that you're going to face based on which quarterback is in the game. So the longer you can hold out and not reveal who's going to be under center, I think that's an advantage for the Jets. I'm also not going to do a score prediction. I'll do that on my Friday episode. I do think that, the Bucs, as they have the first 2 weeks, are going to find a way to win this game. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be lopsided. It's probably going to be a single digit point differential. But even with the offensive line struggles and the injuries there, I think that at the end of the day, much like against Houston, the Bucs just have too many weapons to not be able to find a way to win this game. And they first week it was Emeka Ibuka. Monday it was Bucky and Rashad. This game, for all we know, it could be a Mike Evans game. He could blow up for 140 and 2 touchdowns. I doubt it against Sauce, but if it's not one of those guys, it could be Otten, it could be Shepard. They're deep at the skill positions, and they're going to be able to find those mismatches, create those mismatches, and once again find a way to get this win in front of their home crowd for the first time this season.
Be sure you support James over at Locked On Bucks and John over at Locked On Jets, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Packers, they're looking pretty good. Micah Parsons comes in. They're rolling right now. Meanwhile, the Cleveland Browns, quite the opposite, but there are storylines about when Joe Flacco might get benched. Are they going to give Dylan Gabriel a shot? Is Shedeur Sanders going to get an opportunity? Well, might not come in this game, but the Browns and the Packers, this is a game where the Browns are maybe hoping to play upset. So Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers, as well as Spencer German of Locked On Browns, talk about everything you need to know for the game.
All right, so this is the section of the show where we try to project out paths to victory for both teams. I think Peter's going to have an easier time with this. So, Peter, I will let you go first. What is the path to victory in your estimation for this Packers team, who obviously the Browns going in considered an inferior opponent, but because of the defense and because of Myles Garrett, obviously can't be taken lightly and can certainly make life difficult for the Packers to get some points on the board?
Turnovers. This has been the thing that I've been, and it's in some ways it's the most boring answer, right? Like, turnovers are the great equalizer. Yeah. And we saw last year in the postseason when teams are relatively equal, turnovers are ultimately decide the game, and turnovers can cause a team that is technically, maybe even objectively inferior, to make it a game. And so that to me is the biggest one here. If the Packers don't turn the ball over, they win. I really think it is that simple, because you would need like special teams calamities, which, by the way, Rich Bisaccia's group, not above a special teams calamity over the years. Matt LaFleur's group has had some of those. That has also been in playoff games and, other situations. So not quite the same circumstances, but it's turnovers. And then, I think beyond that, it's the big plays. Generate them on offense, prevent them on defense. Now, one of those is much easier to do than the other one because the Browns don't create explosives.
Yeah.
So if you can do those two things, I think that you can win. The question is then, how convincing do you have to win? How engaged are you? And this is the thing, Spencer. I talked about this. We have a guest on Wednesdays, and we talked about being locked in for these moments. That it was easy to get up for Detroit week 1, easy to get up 4 days later for the Commanders in week 2. Much harder traveling to Cleveland, first road game of the year, against a team that you're 10-point favorites against, basically. and make sure that you put an ass whooping on that team too. If you can do that, then you really are sort of stamping yourself as a Super Bowl team. But that's what you have to do. You have to be focused every single week, because going on the road and winning against anyone in the NFL is hard. I'm maybe overselling it in this case, because I just don't think the Browns are very good. And I think the Packers can attack them in some specific ways. But if they don't turn the ball over, I really think it is as simple as that. If the Packers are even or ahead in the turnover margin, the Packers win.
Well, I will say this does feel like one of those weird instances where the Browns like steal one against a team that they have no business beating, because that happens at least once a year. Last year they beat the Ravens randomly.
Packers would be in good company, right? Yeah, the Ravens and the Ravens might have been the best team in the league all last season. So,
but to your point on the turnover thing, like, yes, I think if the Packers can protect the football, they obviously should win this game, and part of it might be like they might experience a similar thing the Ravens did last week, where it's a struggle for a little while. Maybe like at the half, it's a low-scoring game and the Browns are still in it. And it might just take time to sort of get over that hump and get going, because that's what this Browns defense does to people. It kind of grinds you down for a while, makes life difficult. And the problem isn't ever really the defense as to why the Browns lose. It's always that the offense doesn't complement the defensive effort. And so I think you're right. Like, that could be how this plays out. And if the Packers protect the football, they'll get more opportunities to see that defense. And therefore, later on in the game, we'll probably have the opportunities to exploit them and take some shots downfield and make the plays they need to win.
Okay, but what do you think is the most likely thing to happen?
I mean, I'll say this. I do think that there's a world where the Browns keep this close for a little while, because we've seen them do that these first 2 weeks. And that is all that is all the defense. That is just the defense is the strength of this team. The defensive line and the front seven in particular are the strongest units on this team. And so it's not that I think that the Packers are going to like win running away initially, because I do think there's a world where the Browns can keep this thing interesting going into the half. But I just have my doubts about the offense being able to do much of anything against this Packers defense. And if they are, it's going to start with what I've brought up now 3 times on the show. It is going to be the run game. Quinshon Judkins comes out, looks like the running back that they drafted to be sort of that workhorse leading guy in the backfield. And if he can be that and actually get this offense moving in a positive direction, specifically on the ground, I think then it opens things up for Joe Flacco to take some deep shots, and then they can maybe attack the Packers defense a little bit differently. But if the game plan ends up just turning into either by default or just because this is what they scheme up, which I don't think this is ideally what they want to scheme up. If it turns into what it's been the last couple of weeks, which is just Flacco dropping back 45 plus times and trying to throw the football, A, Micah Parsons is going to eat them alive. And B, it's just not going to end with them, putting enough points on the board to keep up with this Packers team. I think that is a very fair assessment to this game. But I think the path to victory for the Browns starts with the run game actually getting going this week and Quinshon Judkins being the star running back that he was sort of brought in to be.
Yeah, and let me be clear about this. Like, I have the utmost respect for Kevin Stefanski. I think he is a terrific coach, and I think he has been handed an absolute you-know-what sandwich here with what has gone on over the last couple of years. Yeah. Like, I just think he has not gotten a fair shake at all. And part of that is ownership. I don't even blame the general manager, because it seems like ownership has had a strong hand in some of the big decisions over the last few years. Like, we haven't even brought up, because he doesn't play football anymore, Deshaun Watson, but that's a big reason.
He's very active on Instagram, but yeah, he doesn't play football.
Why this team is in a position that it's in. And so I think that sucks. And I also have the utmost respect. Myles Garrett, I think, is an absolutely incredible player. Unfortunately, he is defense Joe Thomas. And it sucks that like each generation now has to have this all-time great player playing Cleveland on dog teams. But that's just been what it has been. And I feel for Browns fans. I have Browns fans in my life. And so I don't like it for them, because I think Browns fans are awesome fans and they deserve more than this. Yeah. I really believe that. So my bemusement over this team has nothing to do with that, because I think the team is bad. And I think the Browns fans deserve so much more than that. I think this is a game the Packers win like 24-10. I think it's that kind of game. And we just sort of move forward. And I don't know that there's even going to be that much interesting to say about it afterward, because it's just like, yeah, what we expected to happen happened, and we move on. And we didn't learn that much about either team. And you go to next week. Like, and that's from your perspective and mine. Yeah. That's not a great sell for a podcast, but that's how I see this playing out.
Yeah, I'll say this for Myles Garrett. At least he had 2 playoff appearances. Joe Thomas never got any of those, but lately it has not been very good for Myles Garrett.
He's our guy on Locked On Packers. Though. Joe's been on the show a bunch, and we appreciate that. So he always has good insight to offer.
Joe's awesome. He's still very involved in the community here, and people love him. So rightfully so. I think 24-10 is a pretty fair prediction. And like I said, I could see it playing out the way I sort of said, where like maybe the Packers going to halftime up like 14-7 or 14-3, and then they pull away in the second half and the Browns just don't have any answers. I last week, I really thought like the defense would do such a good job that they'd keep it interesting. And then the offense would score at least a little bit, where I thought the Browns would at least cover the 11.5 point spread. I don't even have confidence in them at this point to do that. So I'm not going to say it's going to stay within whatever it is. I think it's 8.5 as of recording this.
Oh, is it? It's come down to 9.5 earlier in the week.
Okay. So yeah, 8.5, 9.5, whatever it is. I think the Packers probably do win by at least that. And I do think one thing we didn't hit on that you sort of alluded to, like Stefanski versus LaFleur, is 2 of the better offensive minds in the game. And so to your point, like Kevin, I think does get up for those games and really tries to, pull out some of his best stuff. We'll see if that matters when you have the limitations that you have offensively, but it is kind of a fun matchup from that standpoint too, because these are 2 coaches that do sort of get compared to each other in terms of the offensive prowess that they have.
Well, future Packers offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski, we wish him luck.
It's funny because that's probably fair. It's also funny because that's the reason when people talk about firing Kevin Stefanski or not, one of the go-to things is, well, if they fire him, he's going to get hired immediately by somebody else. And I'm like, that's true. But if they lose like they lost last week, and that's a trend, at some point somebody has to pay the price for the record. So you can't just keep a coach around because he might get hired quickly. I respect the hell out of Kevin Stefanski. I agree with you. I think he is a great offensive coach. We'll see if that matters, or if he can, dig into the bag of tricks a little bit to pull out a win against the Packers. It seems like an uphill battle.
Be sure to check out Peter over at Locked On Packers and Spencer over at Locked On Browns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up, we're going to be diving into the remainder of the 1 p.m. slate of games. Still plenty of great matchups to talk about, and our local experts will guide you through it all. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty to come on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For the Ravens, Lamar Jackson delivered in a big way. Now, in their win against Cleveland on Sunday, it wasn't like he had the most efficient performance, but you look up and the team had 41 points. Lamar Jackson had 4 touchdowns, and the offense as a whole, even though they couldn't get the ground game going, Lamar really helped that offense move forward. And when the pressure was on, he was delivering strikes to DeAndre Hopkins, Tez Walker, Tylan Wallace. He certainly came through, no hesitation. If you've been watching Lamar Jackson week after week, this performance was not a fluke. Lamar Jackson is certainly on a streak. And just like Lamar Jackson delivered for the Ravens, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. Moving along here on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, breaking down the Week 3 NFL action. We talked about some of the 1 p.m. slate of games. We will wrap that up here, starting off with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots. Obviously, Pittsburgh, their defense hasn't been looking great, and for the Patriots, well, they're trying to figure things out with Drake May at the helm. So Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers and Nick Cattles of Locked On Patriots get you ready for game time.
All right, so a little peek behind the curtain here. Last night I was texting with Chris, and I said, I don't like doing predictions so early in the week. I like to hold my prediction until Friday. And Chris said, right, I agree with you, my man. And so we're going to sit on the predictions until our next episodes. So you want to wait for that. But let's get to quickly. We got to run through these a little bit, Chris. Let's get to 3 keys. What is your first key for the Steelers on Sunday?
They have to stop the run. They cannot let TreVeyon Henderson take over this game and make things easier for Drake May. If they do, it's going to put this game in such a crazy mode, and they're going to be at risk for allowing another 3 touchdown plus performance. The Steelers cannot afford to let that happen. By all means, stuff the run. I mean, still respect Drake May. This isn't saying, oh, man, if they stuff the run, Drake May's done and he can't do anything. But you cannot allow any quarterback in today's NFL the chance of having that balanced offense where the run game is just getting chunks. Like last week, you're going to look at the overall numbers and say, oh, well, they did stuff to run sometimes, but a good bit of those was because they stopped Zach Charbonnet for the Seahawks for less than a yard per carry, but then they allowed Kenneth Walker to run like 8 yards per carry. They cannot allow Henderson or whoever on the Patriots roster to run for anything like that. They got to keep this in a game where the run game isn't such a reliable factor, whether it's Henderson or Stevenson or whoever. Don't allow them to take over. That's key number one for the Steelers. What's key number one for the Pats?
Yeah, handle the blitz. Handle the blitz. I know Pittsburgh's aggressive. They love to send their linebackers, Queen and Herbig blitz a number of times when I was watching that Seattle game. So they've got to make sure that they handle the blitz. Pittsburgh's top 5 in the NFL in blitz rate, 45.7% blitz rate last week against Seattle and Sam Darnold. And Drake May's got to be in command. He's got to make sure that he knows exactly what to expect and when to expect it, point out the protections to his guys. A clean pocket is great news for Drake May, so they have to handle the pressure of the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's your second key, Chris?
Second key is establish that balance on offense. We talked about it earlier in the show, but Aaron Rodgers said, we got to run the ball when we see those too high shells. They have to put the fear of the run actually hurting them into the Patriots defense. If they do, then all of a sudden you'll see the middle part of the field open up a little bit more. The Steelers don't have, 3 prime wide receivers that are like, they don't have, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins where they can just say, hey, we're rolling out these guys. We don't care what coverage you're in. We're just going to throw it up to them and they're going to beat you. DK Metcalf is a very good wide receiver and they trust that he's going to win a lot of his one-on-ones. But Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, even the Titans, Pat Freiermuth, Johnny Smith, they're all good players, but they want to create more easier pockets for Aaron Rodgers to not have to throw as many pinpoint super passes that he can still throw, and he still does put passes on the money, but they want to create those easier spaces, and that's what Arthur Smith is really trying to do with this offense. So get that run game going so that there can be a balance, and then if you have that balance, it makes the offense that much more fluid. What's key number 2 for the Patriots?
Yeah, they got to limit the yards after the contact. They got to limit yards after the catch. The missed tackles have been a huge issue for this defense. DK Metcalf can hurt you in that category. Jaylen Warren can hurt you in that category. Jonnu Smith can even hurt you a little bit in that category if they get the football to Jonnu on Sunday. So they're just going to make sure that you wrap up. Don't give up an extra 5, 6 yards, 10 yards. Don't let a 15-yard gain turn into a 25-yard gain. The Patriots have had issues with these explosive plays for the first 2 weeks. They've got to make sure they limit the yak. Your third and final key, Chris.
Don't allow the explosive plays to control this game. Right now, the Steelers are allowing the highest rate of explosive plays in the NFL through 2 weeks, and that is a huge part of this. And this kind of plays into stuffing the runs that balance doesn't be there for the Patriots. But when they do make a play, tackle the guy. Last week, Kenneth Walker gets the ball in 3rd and goal from the 19, and they just pitch it out to him thinking, oh, he'll just get a couple yards, set up a nice field goal. He runs it in for a touchdown. They can't allow moments like that where they have everything lined up, they have things ready to go, but someone takes a bad angle. Someone just doesn't finish the play. And then all of a sudden, there's a big gap in the defense or someone stumbles at the wrong point. You got to limit those big plays. You take those big plays away, and then you force the Patriots to earn every single 3rd down conversion, 1st down, moving the ball, and then they work their way into the red zone. It's like, hey, you know what? If you hit on 9, 10 really good plays in a row, good for you. But the Steelers have to play a way that's going to force you to do that time in and time out. And with anybody, it's tough. With younger quarterbacks, it's also tough. That's got to be a key, though. Limit the explosive plays so that you're not giving away easier points to the Patriots. What's key number 3 for the Pats?
Well, that sounded a lot of that sounded familiar to me. What you just went through with all of the missed tackles and the bad angles, and just clean up the game. A clean operation. One of my surprises here is that through the first 2 weeks, I expected Mike Vrabel's team to be more disciplined. The Patriots have 21 penalties this season, tied for the second most in the NFL. They had 12 last week in Miami. Clean up the penalties. You have a clean game. And that should help you on both sides of the football and on special teams. They've had a couple of penalties on special teams as well. So clean it up, clean up the penalty.
Be sure to check out Chris over at Locked On Steelers and Nick over at Locked On Patriots, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Washington Commanders. Obviously, Jaden Daniels, the big story here. Marcus Mariota is the backup for the Commanders, and that probably looking like what we're going to get here for the Washington Commanders against Geno Smith and that Las Vegas Raiders team. So your boy Q of Locked On Raiders, as well as David Harrison of Locked On Commanders, talk about keys to victory and so much more.
The path to victory in week 3 for both the Commanders and the Raiders, surprisingly straightforward if each or both or either team can stay disciplined. So, Q, let's start with the Raiders. If they're going to leave the East Coast with a win in their carry-on luggage on Sunday, what are the 3 things that they absolutely have to do against the Commanders?
Well, first and foremost, they got to stop handing the ball to the other team, right? I mean, Geno Smith has 4 interceptions so far in the season and only 1 touchdown pass. So he's got to stop throwing it to the other team. And the reason he's doing that, it's not like he's just been bad with his accuracy, but he's been trying to take some shots. He's been trying to force the ball into, double coverage, triple coverage, trying to get into his playmakers' hands. On Monday through 3 interceptions. And he told us that he was impatient. He was just trying to get it all back in one shot, and you just can't do that. And so protect the ball. It's all about the ball. So that's the first and foremost that they have to do is make sure they protect the ball. Secondly, they've got to establish the run game. The run game has not been where anyone expected it to be at this stage of the game. Pete Carroll has told us that they need to continue to work at it and grind at it. And, they're easing Ashton Genty into the mix, but I don't think that you drafted him number 6 overall to ease him in. I think that the offensive line and Ashton Genty need as much work together as possible, and the way to do it is on-the-job training. And that means get the ball and get it to him, put it in his belly in the game early and often, and let him get familiar with that offensive line. Hopefully Jackson Powers-Johnson is back this week. That'll be a big addition back to that offensive line. He missed last week with a concussion, but he was in the red non-contact jersey on Wednesday, so that seems like he's progressing through the concussion protocol. He'll be back at that right guard spot. That's going to help him a lot, but this running game has to be a lot better. They had, 56 yards rushing week 1, and they only had, I want to say, maybe another 50 on Monday. It's just not enough. They need to be up there 80, 85, 90, over 100, whatever the case may be. It's got to be a lot more production in the running game. And then third, defensively, they've got to create a couple turnovers. Right. I mean, again, I go back to it's all about the ball. And when the Raiders are doing really well, I thought their defense did a good job against the Chargers, only holding them to 20 points. And the Raiders threw an interception on the very first play of the game, spotted the 25-yard line to the Chargers, and the Raiders defense held them to a field goal. So that was good, but they didn't come up with any big interceptions, give the team short fields. They need to do that as well. They need to protect the ball. They need to take the ball away, and they need to establish the run game. I think it's that simple. Those three different paths, those three different keys, and they can find a way to get a dub on Sunday. What do the Commanders need to do?
Yeah, bro, I'd say that first interception was wild. I was like, bro, my wings aren't even on the plate yet. Like, what are we doing out here?
Man, it was sudden change. When you hear sudden change on the sideline, something bad has happened, and that's what the Raiders were yelling on Monday night.
Yeah, 100%. For the Commanders, man, I think you got to test those edges, right? I'm with you. Like, I agree with you. Like, I watched the Raiders game. I think that number certainly is inflated, but I do think that perhaps there's still some opportunity there. And this Washington Commanders offensive line is athletic. I think part of the potential silver lining for having Marcus Mariota instead of Jaden Daniels, if that is what happens, is that you can run a little bit more straightforward of a rushing attack, right? Like, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds of it, but as an offensive lineman, when you have a read option on, you make your initial block, but then you kind of have to read the defense because you don't know what's happening behind you. You don't know if the back got the ball, the receiver potentially on a crossing, or the quarterback kept it, and you have to kind of read the defense. Say, okay, it looks like they're going left. We're going right. Now we got to find another block, find something to do. Straightforward run, you just know where you're going. You can get to the second level faster because you have confidence in what your assignments are, and that can maybe play into the hands of the Washington Commanders offensive line. And Marcus Mariota, again, not Jaden Daniels by a long shot from an athleticism standpoint anymore, at least, but certainly can still do a little bit of damage on his own. So try to exploit that, see where the weakness lies in that if you can. And then the great thing, and I hate to pick on Devin because I love my guy, but if you make Devin White look like Devin White of old, you get him move in one direction too often, that's when you hit him with the play action. Maybe you roll away from it, or even if you just drop back from it, you run a tight end behind him, or you sneak a receiver behind him, and Devin likes to get lost in the sauce a little bit in those situations. You might be able to exploit him for a big gain. Discipline. The second thing has got to be discipline, man. I mean, this team is committed way too many penalties. I know last week they actually had fewer penalties than the Green Bay Packers did, but that was the situation where it's quantity versus quality. The quality as in the negative impact that the Commanders' penalties had on them versus the negative impact the Packers' own penalties had on them, much different. Like, that's where the scales definitely tipped. This Washington Commanders defense, or not defense, the entire team just has to be better from a discipline standpoint. I'm kind of looking at Marshawn Lattimore. For one, he hasn't had like the greatest play to start the season as it is, but when you're adding on penalties, it just makes the whole thing look a lot worse. And then force Geno into those mistakes, man. Like, Geno he's throwing the ball into double coverage. He's kind of It reminds me of like Taylor Heineke. F it, Terry's down there somewhere. Like Gino's like, F it, there's a Raider down there somewhere, but there's also a Patriot down there. There's also a Charger down there. Like there's also multiple defenders down there at times. And look, if he's going to start to play that way, and I don't know, and obviously every week is a chance to get that fixed. But this defense is not forced to take away yet this season, and that is not Dan Quinn. That is not Joe Witt Jr. That is not how they want to play. So they got to go out there and get a takeaway. Q, obviously I'm being hyperbolic when I said this, but I said on my show that if they don't get a takeaway against Geno Smith, just the way that he's already played these first 2 weeks, if I'm Joe Witt Jr. at the end of the game, I'm saying, dude, don't even leave the field. Don't take your pads off. Leave your helmet on in front of these fans and everything before they even leave the parking lot. We're running gassers. We're just running because that's ridiculous. And that's not a jab at Geno either. It's just like you said, that's the way he's playing right now. So if that's what he's going to do, you got to take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, he's turning the ball over, right? And he knows better than that. I mean, he's talked about it. He's got to protect the ball. He's got to be smarter. He's got to be more efficient with it instead of just, getting impatient and trying to do too much. He's got to stay within himself. And so, he might have been a little too hyped up on Monday. I don't know. But those 3 interceptions, none of them were good. They all were pretty ugly. They all were preventable, and he didn't. So, no, I don't blame the Commanders. If they say, well, look, everyone gets the interception but us, or they get a takeaway but us, what in the world's really going on? So I can see I'm not mad at that. Gassers for everybody if you can't get a turnover. Maybe the Raiders should implement that as well. Nothing wrong with that.
And as far as the Raiders trying to get Ashton Jeanty going, man, I mean, obviously very talented back. Hasn't worked out the way that he wanted to early on in the season. But, look, Dietrich Wise Jr. being out on that right end spot, Javonte Jean-Baptiste is the guy who's listed as the starter right now, 7th-round pick, second year in the league. They brought in Preston Smith. We'll see how fast they can get him, ramped up and what kind of shape he's in and whether or not they elevate him for the game, all these types of things. But if you're going to do it, that's probably the spot that I think the Raiders attack first. But you also have Javon Kinlaw, who can play inside, outside. So the Commanders have a few tricks up their sleeves too. But I think the biggest thing, man, is just both these teams identifying their inconsistencies. How do they address them, and specifically in week 3? Because you don't got to be better than everybody in week 3. You just got to be better than the Raiders or the Commanders, depending on what side of this matchup.
Well, and the other thing is, I think these 2 head coaches know each other pretty well. Right? Yeah. I think there's some history there with Pete Carroll and DQ, right? I think that they know each other. Pete Carroll told us, I like going up against him. He's fun, right? So I'm sure that they're going to have a nice little inner rivalry between the two. Not quite like Carroll and Harbaugh, but it'll be fun because of the respect that those two have for each other.
We shall see if Jaden Daniels is able to go in this one. That's obviously a huge storyline again. And for more on Q, check him out over at Locked On Raiders. And for David, check him out over at Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Falcons and the Panthers gearing up for an NFC South showdown as they look to pick up a big divisional win. You got Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons, Julian Council of Locked On Panthers. They've got everything you need to know for this game.
Right back here, crossover Thursday, Locked On Panthers, Locked On Falcons, and it's me, Julian Council, with Aaron Freeman, breaking down this 1:00 matchup on Sunday between the 0-2 Panthers and the 1-1 Atlanta Falcons with a newfound pass rush. Is it real, or is it just the same old Falcons, Aaron, and plenty of the Falcons fans out there hoping that they'll rise up to the expectations that you're hard to ever believe in? So we'll see if that happens on Sunday. But looking at this game, what do the Falcons in particular, Aaron, need to do to beat the Panthers and put them in an 0-3 hole where the fan base will be, despondent and quite mad if that happens?
Yeah. I hope the Falcons can do to the Carolina Panthers what they did to the J.J. McCarthy hype last week and just kind of ruin all the hopes and dreams of Panthers fans everywhere. I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Get off to a fast start. It's been a key to success for Jacksonville and Arizona. And if you can get an early lead against this Panthers team, that's going to give an opportunity for this pass rush to really pin their ears back and really test whether or not Chandler Zavala and Cade Mays are as good as the players that are replacing them. And you can force Carolina to be one-dimensional, which I think, doesn't necessarily play to their strengths. And then the other sort of 2 keys that for me are, can this Falcon team convert in the red zone? They struggled last week against Minnesota. That was probably the one blemish in that sort of complete performance for them. They went 1 for 5. They're 2 for 7 on the season. And they arguably, the one red zone conversion they had at the end of the game was Minnesota letting them score in order to get the ball back so that they can have attempt to come back down 2 scores. And currently the Falcons are 28th in red zone efficiency this year on offense. Carolina's 10th in red zone efficiency on defense. So Julian, I know it may be something you're incredulous to say, but this Carolina Panthers defense actually looks like a functional NFL defense this year, which is, a big turnaround from last year. And so can the Falcons, have their get right game in the red zone? I think, this week against Carolina, we'll see. And then the third thing is just, last week after a rough week 1 for special teams, they had a really strong week 2 on special teams with their new kicker, John Parker Romo, making 5 field goals. And just keep that momentum going. Let's not regress back to special teams being a problem like it was in that first game, because in these divisional matchups, these games typically are close, and it's probably going to be a couple of field goals that could wind up deciding the outcome of this game. And so hopefully the Falcons do not fall back down to earth in that regard.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Panthers defense is quite there yet, because against Jacksonville, again, they gave up 200 yards on the dot. And I think it was like 6.2 yards per carry. It wasn't a great day for them. Last week was a better day. I mean, the touchdown that was scored at the beginning of the game was not on the defense, because that was a defensive touchdown by Arizona. And then I did feel like they did a good job by holding the Cardinals to a field goal after there's a DPI call on Mike Jackson to put the ball right there inside the 5. Now, Arizona had scored a touchdown. Trey McBride decided to hold a player, Nick Scott, who was inconsequential to that play, and that got called back. But they still held him to a field goal, and it was a 13-3 game before Dave Canales decided, actually, I don't want to score before the half. Let's punt the ball back to Arizona. And then it was 20-3, then 27-3. And then that's when the comeback happened. So I do think they actually played fairly well last week, considering what everyone's been used to here with the defense of Carolina. So this will be really the test, because I do think Atlanta's going to want to run the ball on them. And let's not pretend like back in January, the Falcons didn't pretty much do whatever they wanted to this defense. And I mean, vice versa. Bryce Young and Carolina did pretty much whatever they wanted to the Falcons defense. And that's how the games are going to go and be that exciting. Then so be it. Forget having a pass rush for Atlanta. Forget stopping the run for Carolina, because at least a shootout can be fun, because I don't think these teams get, especially the Panthers, don't get into too many of those. But looking at just the things that Carolina needs to do, it's kind of like what you said. The Falcons need to start fast, like the Jags and like the Cardinals. The Panthers can't allow that to happen. They have to get off to a good start. They cannot get in the hole, which brings me to the second one. Don't spot the Falcons 10 points. They don't need it. They're clearly a good enough team to where they can win potentially on their own. So why help them like you helped Jacksonville and like you helped Arizona last week, which literally was the difference in the game a week ago. Those 2 turnovers on the opening drive that resulted into 10 points. And then, I mean, I'm focused on Cade Mays and Chandler Zavala, but also the other offensive linemen, do your jobs as well, because there's going to be a lot of focus on those guys stepping in. But Damian Lewis, do your job at left guard right there next to Cade Mays filling in at center. Ike Ekwonu, who came back last week after missing week 1 while recovering from an appendectomy. Do your job. Taylor Moton, he's doing it. I looked over at pass rush win rate, or as far as pass block win rate, rather, on ESPN. He's won every pass block rep so far this season. Now, the sack at the end of the game, Moton was on that guy, but I do think that was actually a communication issue with Chandler Zavala blowing that. So I would assume if ESPN saying he's won every pass block attempt because that was a sack that ended the game. I don't know, but he's been nails. He got that extension before the season. He's a leader in that locker room. He's been the constant there at right tackle. Like, those guys need to also just do their jobs. They're going to win this game and not fall to 0-3. The line over at FanDuel, our friends and presenting sponsors here on Locked On Podcast Network, for the NFL channel at least, they're plus 5.5. The Panthers are at home dogs against the Falcons. You got a prediction? You saving that for Friday, or what you think?
No, 5.5 for a divisional team at home is like, that feels like, hammer the Panthers in this one. If you're expecting a typical NFC South divisional matchup that will go down to the final 5 minutes of the game and probably a field goal that may decide it in that regard. But, I do feel optimistic that the Falcons will win this game, but I don't think it's going to be some sort of smooth sailing, 38-10 type blowout that I think a lot of people may be thinking, given the confidence of how good this team looked in certain areas coming off of that Vikings game. So I think it'll be a typical divisional game. It'll be close, and as every Falcon game goes, like, you're going to be taking your heart medication in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, for me, I was just making sure that I had the right numbers. I got the math wrong a couple weeks ago. Panthers are 19-51 since I've been doing this show. So hard for me to go into any game with confidence that they're going to win, especially the way they've started the season by just not showing up until like the second half. And really, they didn't show up to the season until they were down 27-3 last week. And then it's okay. Maybe you got some positive momentum you can carry over. Bryce Young had, looking at EPA, one of his top 3 performances. Now, the turnovers obviously were the difference in the game, but that's a positive to see that. There's the Bryce you saw against Atlanta back in week 18 in January. Can you see more of that? I mean, I can see him covering. I can see them potentially winning. I can see them just coming out flat again. I can see everything under the sun. Aside from maybe just like completely blowing out the Falcons, I think that's the one I'm looking at. And I'm not really thinking that's in the cards. It could be. Now that I put that out there in the universe, is me not believing that's going to happen. And if it does, I mean, fine by me. I'd rather that than them start off 0-3. And then a lot of y'all just be like, yep, do see ya. So we'll see. I'm hoping for a good game. I'll take a shootout. I'll be there on Sunday in the press box, and hopefully it'll be a beautiful Carolina blue sky in Uptown Charlotte for the Falcons and the Panthers.
Be sure you check out Julian over at Locked On Panthers and Aaron over at Locked On Falcons, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 1 p.m. slate of games, we got the Houston Texans and the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 teams, again, looking to pick up a big divisional win. Divisional wins early in the season, very, very important. So you got John Hickman of Locked On Texans, Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars, big breakdown keys to victory and how each team can win this game.
All right, we got the winning formula here, but first I'm going to ask John for a winning formula on PrizePicks. What's your PrizePicks selection going to be, dog?
Well, I'm going to get back to my guy that's been letting me down in fantasy. Brian Thomas right now, more or less 68.5 receiving yards. I'm going to take the more on that. Hopefully he can get it going. Not only get me right in fantasy, but also get me right with some extra cash in my pocket. So,
all right, there you go. I like it. If that happens, as a part of the winning formula, the Jaguars will win this game. Because it sounds like to me that that's going to be a time for them to try to get that dude going, right? They're fully in support of him. They need him. If we're gonna be as good as we think, they need him to get going. They also need Trevor to get some chunk plays that are through the air as opposed to catch and run situations. I also think you're gonna see Travis Hunter on defense a little bit more, just like you did last week in Cincinnati. And I think you're gonna see him continue to make his way in that way. I just personally think the winning formula is you got to harass CJ Stroud. And there's a pathway to doing that because he's been getting harassed all year. And the Jaguars love pressure. They love exotics. They love bringing stuff when you don't think they're going to bring it. They'll blitz you. They'll have a safety blitz on third down. They'll send somebody up the 8 gap. They do a lot of twisting. And if your offensive line is struggling, you're going to struggle trying to stop it. So the winning formula actually lines up with what the strength of this, the biggest gap, the biggest discrepancy in strength versus weakness is the Jaguars front versus Houston's offensive line.
Yeah, man, and y'all have been playing a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 4. The last 2 teams Houston has taken on, they played a lot of cover 3. Rams, Tampa Bay. Houston has not been able to get any explosive plays from that. So if the Jaguars come out with that same showing in front and the cover 3, cover 4 has kind of been split even, but if they come out with that cover 3, Houston has to find a way, which is we get a guy y'all know back very well. Christian Kirk back Sunday. Braxton Berrios back Sunday. Also, Houston starting center Jake Andrews will be back on Sunday, so he'll help with the communication with the offensive line. But they got to find a way to get the ball in the playmaker's hands underneath, right? If them corners are going to play back like that, then find a weak side of the field, play the flats if you need to, get some of those high-low concepts going, get the ball out, but get the ball out quickly. And if Houston can do that without CJ Stroud having to take on the amount of pressure he's been taking on the last couple of games with guys in his face, I think that's very much the key to winning this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, by the way, you and I like to keep it real when we talk to one another. Mm-hmm. I am not going to say I'm shocked or surprised. I think the most shock, surprise, or whatever word we want to use that we can think of is Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts.
Oh, yeah.
But the Texans and Jaguars play each other hard every time they play. The thing is, Houston has a 13-8 record against Jacksonville when playing on the road in Jacksonville. For some reason, they find ways to muster out a win. So CJ Stroud has to be better. The offensive line has to be better. They got a tough task. 3 weeks in a row, they got guys that's coming off the edge on the inside. It's very hard to stop. But get the ball out quickly and try to find ways to beat that pressure. They did very well with the screen game, introduced that a little bit more throughout the game. But by all means, keep Dare Ogunbowale off the field because that's going to continue to get CJ Stroud killed.
Yeah, I like that Marks kid out of the backfield. He's dangerous. And then Dalton Schultz. I think Dalton Schultz need to be a real good friend to CJ Stroud if they're going to win this game. But we ain't worried about it. I think they beat them 6 or 7 times here in a row. This is a new team, new direction, new attitude, new players, and ain't none of that stuff. None of that smoke from the past going to have any output or impact on this game. So I'm going to go ahead right now and give you a game prediction. I'm going to even give it to you with a score. Jaguars 30-13 over. Woo! I don't know what you're doing all that. I don't know what you're pulling your hat off for and doing all that yelling for. I'm just trying to tell you what it's going to be now.
If you think you're lonely now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 32-13.
3-0-13.
Okay. So this was the game that I felt Houston should have no problem winning coming into the season. Early in the season. Later in the season, I thought it would be a different subject. I'm still going to rock with my pick. The thing about Houston's defense, they only allowed 14 to the Rams, and it took the Buccaneers late in the game to go get 20. 7 punts or a missed field goal in a row after they scored their last touchdown in between the game-winning touchdown. So the defense, very bend, don't break. They're holding guys from getting into their red zone. I still believe that will be something that will help Houston against the Jags Sunday. I am going to go because of the defense and because they're getting guys back. I'm going to go 21-17 Houston.
I understand that. Now, I will admit I had a little bit of trepidation about picking the Jags, especially picking them with such a big gap, right? But the reason I did it is because, see, Houston has lost to 2 really good teams, and I think they're too good to be 0-3. But I believe had the Jaguars won that game last week, and even though they did everything to lose, they dropped the pass in the end zone with about 7 minutes to go. They dropped the ball that would have given them a first down. They could have run the clock out, and Cincinnati would have never got the ball back. And then they had the pass interference penalty. So I think because they lost that game like that and they know they let one get away, I think they come out hungry this week. And it kind of probably lit a fire in them that winning a game ugly or winning a game that you did everything to lose, but you were still too good to lose it and you went ahead and pulled it out. But then I think you might start feeling all puffed up, like, having popcorn muscles and they ain't got no weight on it. And then you come out here against a hungry team and get smashed. But I think that game woke them up a little bit. I think they realized they can't let opportunities get away in this league. And it did them a favor because Houston ended up losing the next day.
Two teams right now, like I said, Indy shocking us all. They lead the division, but 2 teams right now that everybody knows that the AFC South is the weaker, if not the weaker. It's the NFC South and the AFC South, 2 weaker divisions in the NFL. So the division is going to always be up for grabs. Anybody can get it. And I still think Houston will end up winning this division, though they can't go down 0-3. This is why I think this would be a tough competitive game. For Jacksonville, I look at a team that has kind of been somewhat of a laughing stock the last few seasons, right? And then for Houston, just going down 0-3 with all of the talent that you have, considering what some people may feel like is BS what you sold us in the offseason, that's just inexcusable.
Yeah.
And so they got to come out on fire, and they got to come out and get a dub. So I think this is going to be a tough game. That's why the 30-13, that's too far of a gap. This is 2 teams that absolutely need to get a dub. For Jacksonville, hey, listen, man, we one step closer to maybe gaining control of the division. For Houston, we cannot go down 0-3. We got to fight. We can't let ourselves down, which is why I think this should be an entertaining game.
All right, I got to correct you on one thing. We have not been the laughing stock of the league the last few years. Like we went 4-13 last year. It went 9-8 2 straight years in a row. The 2 years before that, so we have not been
the Urban Meyer thing was a problem.
That was 4 years ago. We the last 3 years we went 9-8 because that was Doug Peterson. 9-8, 4-13, and they got fired. So we have been kind of holding it down a little bit. Come on, John, give us a little bit of credit.
We've been laughing at y'all.
Yeah, okay, and we've been.
That's why we got to win, because I don't want to hear you laughing at us.
And you know what? Y'all been laughing at us, and guess what we've been doing? Holding that beer for y'all, waiting for y'all, and we laughing at y'all as y'all walking down that same road after you get your butt whooped in the playoffs.
Come on, Texas, please.
It's all good.
Be sure to check out Tony over at Locked On Jaguars and John over at Locked On Texans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. That'll do it for the 1 p.m. slate of games, but it will not do it for us. We've got a great 4 p.m. slate for week 3. We're going to talk about that and so much more coming up on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. Makes every game even more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. And for the big Monday night game, the Ravens and the Lions, that's the huge matchup. And right now, the Ravens, they are 5.5-point home favorites over the Lions. So maybe you like the Lions as the road underdogs at plus 5.5. Personally, for me, look, even though I cover the Ravens, I like that number for Baltimore. I think their roster is a little better than Detroit's. 2 really good teams, but I think the Ravens will get the job done here. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Continuing on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, Kevin Ostreicher still rocking out with you here, diving into the Week 3 action. Crazy, we're already in Week 3. Time flies here. Almost a sixth of the way done the season so far. Absolutely unbelievable. But we're going to continue diving in. We just finished up the 1 p.m. slate of games, breaking those all down with the help of our local experts. So we've got more local experts on deck. They're going to break down these 4 o'clock slate of game matchups. And let's start off with the Broncos and the Chargers, 2 AFC West teams. Chiefs right now, we'll get to them in a little bit. They're 0-2. So one of these 2 teams could potentially capitalize. The Chargers at 2-0. The Broncos at 1-1. Cody Rourke of Locked On Broncos and David Drogemeyer of Locked On Chargers. They break down the game for you.
As we jump into the 4th quarter action of today's Crossover Thursday here, brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks. I want to say thanks to all the everydayers and first listeners once again for making each of these shows exactly what they are. We're going to get into what each team needs to do in order to come out on top in Sunday's AFC West Divisional Showdown with a victory here. David, let's start off with you. If you're looking at this Los Angeles Chargers team who's off to a 2-0 start, really good vibes from them overall. Short week, though, which is always a challenge. Some injuries, being banged up just a tiny bit. What is it that the Chargers must do in order to beat the Broncos to go to 3-0, not only in the division, but also just at the start of the season? That momentum right there could be very, very valuable down the stretch when it matters when you talk about tiebreakers.
Absolutely. This is a huge game. I've always said that these division games count as 2, and if the Chargers want to improve to 3-0, the first thing they have to do is win the turnover battle. The Chargers have either won or tied the turnover battle so far through 2 games, and forcing an interception from a guy who has 3 interceptions on the season in Bo Nix through 2 games is something that the Chargers must absolutely do. They did a good job of that against Geno Smith, picking him off 3 times, making things very, very difficult, keeping that blanket coverage and not letting the quarterback go out there and throw it deep and have to be very disciplined to take what the defense gives you. And that's very difficult to do for 4 quarters. So if the Chargers can turn the ball over and get Bo Nix to be able to give them another opportunity to score, they might need it against one of the better defenses in the league.
Okay. And so I think on the flip side there too, for Denver offensively, you look, the Chargers, they play a lot of zone. Their safeties do a good job of disguising it. They like their athleticism at their linebacker position. You know, the Broncos have faced a lot of zone so far through the first 2 weeks of the season. Now it'll be the 3rd week. Now, certain looks they'll get man here, but one thing I've noticed is locate where Gilman is. Where is he? Where's he hiding? Because this is a guy who breaks on the football quickly. If you sail a pass, he's going to be in the right spot there. This is one thing that I'm keen for this game because the Broncos offensively, they have concepts with Troy Franklin, with Cortland Sutton, and when they're facing zone defenses, they have guys running clear out routes to help try to free somebody up. Alohi's a guy that I think that you always have to kind of pay attention to where he's at because he could force you to turn the football over here. So for me, for Bo Nix, it's playing clean football. Last week, he did just that. He over 73% completion percentage, attacked the ball downfield, and had really good ball placement. His only interception of the week last week came on a tip pass by a defender because he had to alter his arm trajectory. The ball sailed on a pass intended for Sutton and ended up being picked by Bynum of the Indianapolis Colts. So it's avoiding those turnovers. But Bo and the offense last week, they were in charge on the road, and unfortunately, they couldn't sustain late there. They had a couple of key penalties that backed them up, and then they had a missed field goal. So don't turn the football over in inopportune situations. Week one, you had the 2 turnovers there, but your defense was able to be as good as it was. That helped negate a negative performance by the offense. And then week 2, the Broncos offense had a great performance there, and then the defense had a disasterly performance. So can you marry those two together? I think that's going to be a big key here. I want to ask you as well, if you're Justin Herbert and this Chargers team trying to figure out how to keep this momentum going, what is the key here against this Denver defense?
I think what they have to do in this game that they haven't done through the first 2 games very effectively is run the football, and they need to be a little bit more committed to it. I think to start the game against the Raiders, they threw it like 8 or 9 straight times, and it took them a while to be able to get into that rhythm of being able to run the ball. And hey, I get it. It's hard to be able to take the ball out of Justin Herbert's hands, especially the way he's been playing to start the season. 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, is 3rd in the league in passing yards. He has absolutely been one of the best players in the National Football League to start the season. So I get it, but you have to have balance. And if you want to be able to utilize one of those biggest weapons that Greg Roman has shown a propensity to use in the play action, to do that at its most effective, you have to be able to rip off some more effective runs. So I'm looking at the offensive line, who all of them have a run blocking grade according to PFF of 60 or under, and that's something that has to improve. They have to get better, open up these holes for Amarian Hampton and Najee Harris so they can take advantage of some of those vulnerabilities in the middle of that defense of the Broncos. They got to run the football if they want to win this football game. They also have to win on 3rd down, Cody. It's something that is massive for both of these teams, but Chargers defense has been pretty good at it. They've ranked 20th in the NFL for allowing opponents to convert at 43.8, which is great. But on offense, they were only 4 of 11 against the Raiders, and that's just not good enough. You have to be able to stay on the field and convert your 3rd downs. You have to be able to do that if you want to win this game. For the Broncos, I guess, what would you say is one of the things that you guys have to do to beat this very good Chargers football team?
It goes down to what hurt them last week. It's 1st down efficiency. The Broncos last week on 1st down allowed an average of 9.8 yards per play, and that kind of creates a death by 1,000 paper cuts, and they couldn't figure out where to stop the bleeding. And I think that's going to be a big key against this Chargers team because, I mean, even last year when Denver faced LA, the money down was 3rd down. Justin Herbert was so effective on 3rd down against Denver, whereas this year I think the Broncos' biggest issue so far is allowing big plays on 1st down. That was a trend that happened really after they lost Riley Moss to an injury. After they played the Raiders, I think it was week 12 of last year, they started giving up big plays after big plays, and a lot of that came on 1st down. So that's kind of been an issue dating back to last season. 1st down efficiency is going to be key here, but it's also going to have to be balanced here from Vance Joseph, right? Because if you're deploying a man blitz scheme where you're locking up and you're saying, hey, we're going to cover these guys man-to-man. We're going to send 1 or 2 extra defenders, and we're hoping our pressure is going to get there. You put your defense in a tough spot. Now, granted, the Broncos believe they have the guys that can cover in man coverage effectively, and certainly I agree with that. They do. But if you are getting these different route concepts that are running your corners downfield constantly, and then all of a sudden now you have to bite up a little bit, your defense is tired, your secondary is tired. And that's where it's like you have to find balance if you're Vance Joseph, because I've seen how the Chargers have played this year against zone coverage. They're very patient. They have different clear out routes, and they end up finding Ladd McConkey on a crosser all the way across the field there because they have a route that causes the corner to run off on the opposite side of the field, and they bring Ladd all the way across. That's going to be something they're going to have to counteract in this game. So can you balance your man and your zone looks here effectively? Can you disguise your coverage? You're going to deploy some more dime looks this week, especially with all the playmakers that this team has. It's about finding that flexibility. And if the Broncos have a new inside linebacker this week, if Sternad or Greenlaw can't play, it could be second-year linebacker Lavelle Bailey, who doesn't have a lot of NFL experience right now. So this is definitely, if you're the Chargers, they're probably keying the linebacker position this week, saying, hey, this is where we're going to attack. Not so much the safeties and the corners yet, but if you attack those middle linebackers, then it changes how those safeties and corners play. That's going to be a huge key for this Broncos defense this week against this Chargers-led offense by Justin Herbert.
And you brought up Ladd McConkey, which I'm glad that you did, but I think a guy who has really been one of the biggest agitators that has returned is Keenan Allen. And I think the reason for that is it is really a pick your poison situation with Keenan and Ladd because they are both route technicians. They both are able to get open very, very quickly, and they have very strong hands and good established chemistry with Justin Herbert. And when you put them both on the same side, it is a nightmare for defenses to have to defend, and it's something that absolutely could affect the outcome of this game. How effectively the Broncos are able to cover Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey on third down in particular is something that's going to be very, very important. But also my last thing here, and I'll wrap up with this, the Chargers have to be more efficient in the red zone. 1 for 3 scoring touchdowns is not good enough. Against a defense like the Broncos, when you get in the red zone, you have to turn that into touchdowns because you don't know how many opportunities you're going to get. When you get to that gold zone, that red zone, you got to make it count.
And that's one of the biggest strengths of the Broncos. Even though they gave up 473 last week in terms of yards, they held up when the Colts got into the red zone there, and they limited their production there, forced them to settle for field goals. The chunk plays ended up getting them later on. But, yeah, the red zone defense for Denver so far is pretty stout this season. This is going to be a big game. I mean, like we said at the beginning of the show, for the fight for the top of the AFC West, it's very crucial right now because the Broncos and Chargers are in a position they haven't been over Kansas City. Granted, it's early on in the year, but with them winless, and we're all praying for Russell Wilson this week to lead the Giants to to a victory against the Chiefs to make them go 0-3 on the year.
Oh, yeah.
But you have a chance to separate yourself a little bit from the Chiefs. You put them in a tough position that they honestly haven't been in since Patrick Mahomes has taken over as the quarterback there of that franchise. 2:25 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff is obviously going to be a fun one here between two AFC West rivals.
Be sure to check out David over at Locked On Chargers and Cody over at Locked On Broncos, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't look now. The Arizona Cardinals are 2-0. They are leading the NFC West, but they are leading it with the San Francisco 49ers. Both teams right now 2-0 at the top of that NFC West division. They will be having a showdown in week number 3. So Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals and Brian Peacock of Locked On 49ers, they preview the game.
So Calais Campbell doing Calais Campbell-y things so far early with the Arizona Cardinals. Got a couple sacks. Talk to me about the defensive line rotation and if that's an area where the Cardinals could potentially have an advantage against the 49ers offensive line with a banged up Hall of Famer in Trent Williams, and then, some up and down play throughout the line and a rookie left guard in Connor Colby. Looks like he's going to start with Ben Barch injured this week.
Yeah, it's a lot of everything. So starting with the not so great first, Darius Robinson is one of the 10 worst graded interior defensive linemen in the NFL through 2 weeks. I think he's 134 out of 148, 138 out of 148, something like that. Dante Stills, very unknown, like not a household name, was a 6th round pick a couple of years ago. He's been the best interior defensive lineman the Cardinals have had up until this season. He's playing well. And then you have Dalvin Tomlinson, a big body up front, one of the better run stuffers we've seen over the last 6 or 7 years. And yeah, Calais Campbell's doing his best LeBron James impersonation. Like the dude just he's as jovial about the game as he was when he came into the league. Like everybody loves Calais Campbell, 6'8", 300 and whatever pounds. He's one of the best interviews. He's got a great voice. Like the dude is just great. And, he had a couple sacks. He ended the game last week. Not only is this defensive line exponentially better than what it's been the last couple of years, and that's pretty obvious. Throwing in Josh Sweat, Baron Browning are both ranked highly coming off the edge. Rushing forward, even though they're not getting home, it's doing the job. And I know it's against two teams who aren't the best. I know the sack numbers aren't fantastic, but Jonathan Gannon doesn't care about sack numbers. He cares about getting the ball. And the Cardinals, had a strip sack for a touchdown last week. They had an interception on the next drive. This is a more than serviceable defensive line. And I think we're going to see both sides, Brian. This is the coming out party. This is it. This is when the season starts. All the cobwebs are off. No more secrets. We're going to throw everything out. And then we're going to see what more hobbled team is going to reign supreme. And I don't think this game is going to be close. I just don't know which way it's going to go yet.
Yeah, for the Cardinals, it feels like that college schedule where you had the non-conference stuff. You had Alabama A&M, and you had Ball State, and then all of a sudden, okay, now we're going to jump into that conference action. We have a big-time matchup this week, so that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be a popcorn game for me, and learn a little bit about these Arizona Cardinals. I had a lot of good things to say about the Arizona Cardinals coming into the year too. So a couple of unbeatens, and of course, knocking off your division opponents is a really good way to go win your division. Are the Cardinals ready for prime time? One of the key matchups to me in the paths to victory is, and I think this is part of, playing a lot of that zone defense for Robert Saleh and the 49ers is getting better against athletic quarterbacks, because it's been an Achilles heel for the 49ers defenses for a while. And they've got speed at linebacker, D. Winters and Fred Warner, probably the most athletic pair of linebackers in the NFL right now. And it's been amazing to watch number 53, D. Winters out there doing his best Dre Greenlaw impression. And that was one of the big losses for the 49ers. And I'm hearing from Broncos fans are like, man, this is rough because Dre Greenlaw can't get on the field because he's constantly hurt. And all of a sudden the 49ers go develop another one. And Robert Saleh is the linebacker whisperer, seeing these guys fly around, all the beef I talked about that they have up front. And it's going to be huge because you got to keep Kyler Murray at bay. Can't let him go make big plays and maybe hope he makes some mistakes. And I'd probably ask you, are we seeing a new Kyler Murray? Is he taking more steps, or is he just kind of the same guy that we've seen in recent years?
All you want is the B to B plus version of him. Like, Brian, the reason why I struggle with this, and every day is like Locked on Cardinals listeners know this. Like I say, I struggle with this. When he's at his absolute peak, only 5 quarterbacks can do that. 7, 6. He's a bona fide top 7 or 8 quarterback at his absolute peak. And then at his valley, he's a bottom 7.
Brock Purdy and maybe 4 more, right?
Yeah. Okay. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's, you know what? You took the words right out of it. If you want to co-host Locked on Cardinals too, I think we get along.
I was just trying to count. I was like, okay, well, Brock and Lamar, obviously, and then maybe there's a couple more guys.
Yeah, I think that's about it. And then just Kyler. I think that's it. That's completely rational. The last time Kyler Murray was on the Levi Stadium field, he housed it from 45 or 50, knew right away that it was gone. Like, we've talked on this crossover for 8 years now. So that's a lot of shows. Every single time since 2019, you've said the 49ers struggle with mobile quarterbacks, and it hasn't waned. With Kyler Murray, his floor is higher than it has been. He's got a better defense. He's got the best skill position players, the best offensive line he's had. He's been very efficient. He's thrown the ball very well. And he had that weird interception in Carolina, but like, this could be the best, most competent football from a floor standpoint than we've seen. It's not about the ceiling in 2025. It's only about the floor and winning games. And so far, so good, even though the opponents haven't been fantastic.
Yeah, kind of a middle of the field game too, the way I'm looking at it, just because the Cardinals are a team that, and we know how the 49ers offense operates. They want to be balanced. They want to be able to run the football, a lot of aggressively intermediate throws. I call it over the middle of the football field. And for the Cardinals, they want to run the ball. You got a hammer in Connor. You got the speed in Benson. You got a quarterback that can extend plays. And you've got one of the better tight ends in the NFL that needs to be covered by linebackers and safeties. And so I would put both linebackers out there. Fred Warner, highest graded, I think, linebacker in the NFL right now. No surprise, playing. He was Defensive Player of the Year type stuff last year before he broke his ankle, and he just looks the same again this year. And then you got the rookie Marcus Siegel at safety as well with Jason Pinnock that have to maintain over the top when Kyler Murray gets out on the move and have to come down and run support and have to cover, that tight end. So I think that's really the area of the field that this game is going to be won and lost. It's a middle of the field football game. And I like the Niners linebackers, young secondary. We'll see how they hold up. That's my path.
Yeah.
Fred Warner wins.
Yeah, Fred Warner. Well, God, I'm sick of talking about him. I'm sick of talking about him. He's so good. It's just, how do you go from Patrick Willis, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner? It just doesn't make any sense. So it's interesting that you say that.
Navarro Bowman.
Yeah, Navarro Bowman. That's right. It's interesting you say that because one of the more interesting storylines around Marvin Harrison Jr. specifically is his usage this year in route running. It's not just run straight, Marv. It's like, oh, let's develop a little bit more. Let's actually mature as a play caller, number one, with Drew Petzing and Kyler Murray going through his progression and stuff like that. There's been a lot more crossing routes that we saw the birth last year, as you may remember, when they played the 49ers. It was 4th down inside their own 30. There was this huge sweeping crossing route that Marv ran. Kyler threw him the ball. He went up and got it, and that extended the drive and allowed the Cardinals to go down and win the game. When it comes to Marv, there's been a lot more just crossing routes, not drag routes, not sweeping. Let's see how Kyler Murray can extend the play, just crossing routes across the middle, timing routes. And it's worked pretty well so far. So there's been a lot of talk in Phoenix about his usage. And I think it's a Marv problem. I think it's time. It's like, all right, it's time. It's time. Give us everything. And I'm not saying he doesn't work hard or anything like that, but this could be the game where you see the full Marv package. And damn it, I hope it's here. Because if they unlock that, this offense knows no bounds.
Check out Alex over at Locked On Cardinals and Brian over at Locked On 49ers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Dallas Cowboys are still trying to figure life out without Micah Parsons. Picked up a very big one over the New York Giants in week number 2. Brandon Aubrey, the hero in that one. Meanwhile, the Chicago Bears are still trying to figure out life with Ben Johnson, their new head coach. Obviously, it was a little rough for them in week 2 against Ben Johnson's former team, the Detroit Lions. So Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys and Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears talk about how each team can get the better of the other.
All right, as we move our crossover Thursday, Locked On Bears, Locked On Cowboys forward, I want to get into some of the keys of the game. And then this is kind of blended in with some of the matchups here tend to be keys to the game. But I think from a Chicago Bears perspective, there's a feeling of like, let's slow things down in all senses of the word and try and control the clock. And maybe your best defense is going to be keeping the Cowboys offense on the field and keeping your defense off the field. And that means they're going to want to run the ball and they're going to want to take their time and not have Caleb Williams rushing or feeling like you're in this shootout where, hey, you got to throw, you got to hit somebody. Like if they can just kind of keep it nice and simple. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, hit the middle of the field in the passing game, maybe off some play action. If you can get that running game going, I think they'd like to just slow things down and not let this devolve into like Russell Wilson moon bombs back and forth like the Cowboys saw last week.
Well, and honestly, I think that the Cowboys want to do the opposite. I think they want to try to get the possessions up in this game. They only had 3 offensive possessions in the first half against the Giants. And a lot of that is because their defense just couldn't get off the field. And that's why it's very important for the Cowboys to start this game off hot. Against Philadelphia in week 1, they scored touchdowns on their first 2 drives. And that kind of allowed them to keep a balanced offense where Dak didn't have to step back and throw the ball 58 times like he did in week 2. So I expect the Cowboys to play with a lot of pace early in this game, try to be aggressive to build that lead, turn Chicago into a, pass first type of team. And then we're off. And I think, honestly, I think the Cowboys are going to have to try to win games 38-34 this year. Don't be surprised if they're uber aggressive to get this game started.
That's going to be interesting to see the back and forth there because so far through 2 games this season, the Bears have been very good out of the gate. The scripted plays on offense, they drive down and score touchdowns. And that was not something they were doing under the Eberflus regime at all. And then like the whole first half, they've generally been able to hang in there. And then like the first game against the Vikings, obviously the fourth quarter is when everything fell apart. And against the Lions last week, it was really like right at the end of the half, they gave up a late touchdown and were kind of demoralized. Then coming in out of halftime, they were slow. And it's just been a struggle to like sustain that early success and energy. So I think that's going to be the key for the Bears. Like if the Cowboys come out aggressively, like, do you have an answer for it? And then can you maintain that? Or will the Cowboys aggressive defense in those moments wear you down to the point where then you don't have that answer to follow up?
And another thing for Dallas is watch their special teams. They believe with their offense and their special teams, they're going to be able to win a lot of games
And I don't necessarily disagree that now the defense might be so bad that it prohibits them from doing that. But we saw last week Brandon Aubrey kick a 64-yard field goal to get them to overtime. He kicked a 46-yard field goal in overtime to win the game. Kavontae Turpin is one of the best kick returners in the league. That is a phase that they have to win if they want to beat some of these good teams. And I know Chicago's 0-2. I still think they are a good team. Keep an eye on that, because if they're losing the special teams battle, or if they're not getting good field position, which was the case very early in the game against the Giants, that could be ultimately the difference. So keep an eye on the Cowboys special teams. They are one of their most important factors in winning games this year.
And the Bears retained Matt Eberflus as special teams coordinator from last year. So there's definitely going to be some familiarity with the kinds of things the Bears want to do on special teams. And it was definitely a weakness for Chicago in week 1 against the Vikings. Didn't give up like a long return by any means, but like it was just kind of those steady, solid returns where they were always getting 5 or 10 more yards than they should. And then the Bears missed a field goal and had a punt that it wasn't like fully blocked, but it was tipped enough to be a bad punt at that point. They seem to have corrected it for week 2 against the Lions, but I could see the Cowboys smelling some blood in the water there and saying, hey, we've got some opportunities to make something happen. And the Bears haven't.
Yeah, as I say, this wasn't the case in week 2, but we saw it in week 1 against Philadelphia, where, Philadelphia was just kicking the ball out of the back of the end zone and giving the Cowboys the ball at the 35. And that can be dangerous against this Cowboys offense because, number one, they're very good. And number two, they've got a kicker that feels absolutely comfortable kicking the ball from the 50-yard line, which means you need 15 yards to be in scoring range, right? And that's why we're seeing teams try to be more aggressive, making Kavontae Turpin return the ball. Didn't have a lot of success last week. Keep an eye out in this game, because I do think that little difference in field position between the 25 and 35 could end up being the difference in this game.
Briefly, before we wrap up with game predictions here, I want to just touch on the stakes here. I mean, I think for Chicago, it's easy to say 0-2, like you can't fall to 0-3. Like this would be a disaster start for Ben Johnson, et cetera, et cetera. For the Cowboys at 1-1, we were talking about this briefly offline before we started. Like, why does this game feel so pivotal for them? Like 1-2 is not good, but like, could you survive a 1-2 start?
I mean, theoretically, yes, you could, but they play Green Bay in Dallas in week 4, and I think we all know what's going to be coming in that game, right? Now, the schedule does get a little softer for Dallas after that, but they play a stretch in November, December, where it's just a gauntlet. It's Kansas City, it's Philadelphia, it's Detroit, like the Chargers, Minnesota. Like, they have to rack up some of these early season wins in order just to stay alive and stay competitive as we get to the meat of their schedule. This is a game where, depending or right now on FanDuel, the Cowboys are 1-point favorites. You've got to go and steal this game on the road. Give yourself some cushion. You lose this game and you lose to Green Bay in week 4 and you're 1-3. It's going to get dark quick in Dallas.
And I'm seeing 1.5-point favorites for Chicago on FanDuel right now.
So it's been flipping back and forth all week, which is fascinating. Yeah,
exactly. It's going to be a fun matchup to watch. So where does that leave you as far as predictions? I have a feeling. So like I have yet to predict a Chicago Bears win this season and have been correct, but this one feels to me like I might be the first time I'm willing to say, hey, I think they're going to figure this out. But I don't imagine you're thinking the Cowboys are going to lose this one either.
I don't know. I think I would be willing to pick Chicago here just because, and honestly, this matters a lot in the NFL. They're the more desperate team. They're at home. They kind of have to have this one. And I think for Dallas, you're coming off an emotional division win, back-to-back division games. I'm not saying they're going to have a letdown, because I don't know if you can really have a letdown, but this is a tough spot for Dallas with all the injuries they have. I think we're going to get a very close game. I think I would take Chicago. Now, I know it's early in the week. We'll see once the injury reports come out, but that's my lean right now.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am too. Like, I certainly don't think the Bears are going to come in and dominate by any means. Like, the 1.5-point spread feels about right. Like, it's going to come down to probably the last possession or so, because they're going back and forth with a couple of late touchdowns in the fourth quarter, where maybe Dallas leads with 5 minutes to go, and then the Bears lead with 2.5 to go, and then the Cowboys get the ball back with one more time. I think it's going to be that kind of down to the final possession type of game. And I don't trust either of these defenses to be the one to make a key stop. So maybe it's
not at all.
Which offense touches the ball last? I think that's going to be key to this game.
Check out Lauren over at Locked On Bears and Marcus over at Locked On Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 4 p.m. slate of games, the Seattle Seahawks and the New Orleans Saints. Sam Darnold versus Spencer Rattler. And you have two teams that, again, trying to get a big win early in the season. The Saints obviously 0-2 right now. The Seahawks, they are 1-1. So you have Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints and Corbin Smith of Locked On Seahawks getting ready for game time.
Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Saints. I'm Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. He's Ross Jackson of the Locked On Saints podcast. And a special thanks to all the 12s and Saints fans tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Saints your first listen 5 days a week. We've got a big matchup coming up here, Ross, on Sunday. And for the Saints at 0-2, they're just looking to get into the win column. The Seahawks were able to do that this past week against the Steelers. They're riding momentum coming out of a game they were losing at halftime and then decisively won in the second half. They're hoping to carry that over at home, whereas we've talked about a lot in this episode. It has not been easy sledding for the Seahawks at home. Looking from a Saints perspective, what are a few things that jump out to you? If they're going to get that big win and they're going to continue Seattle's horrors at Lumen Field, what are a few things that the Saints are going to need to do? What do they need to accomplish this weekend at Lumen to get to 1-2 in the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have two easy ones. Spencer Rattler has to keep his momentum going. He was great and he was really good in week 1, and then he got even better going into week 2. So keep that momentum going when you're going up against a tougher opponent and you're facing only your 4th road game of your career here in the early going. So that's a big one for me. And then, of course, the last thing is just the other thing is just simply the defense just kind of has to get fixed. I mean, look, and especially fixing their own momentum. They are one of the worst teams right now when it comes to third down conversion, allowing 50% of third downs to be converted by the opponent. They're one of only 4 teams that's over 50% conversion percentage. And if you look at where they are on 3rd and 7 or more, they're allowing 40% of those to be converted. They're one of the best first down teams in the NFL, top 3 in the league in yards per play and first down, but they are just not doing themselves any favors when it comes to third down. So I think that a big part of this is going to be, can they get pressure on third down? Saints have a 22.2% pressure rating. That's 31st in the NFL, 30th in the NFL. It's one of the worst in the league. And so can they start to tick that up and find a way to be able to create some impact so they can get off the field on third downs? If the Saints can do those two things, that's going to lay the foundation for them to win if they could pull off an upset. But without those two things, they'd never be able to pull off an upset.
Yeah, for me, from Seattle's perspective, I'm keeping it really easy here as far as what they need to do on offense. Clint Kubiak, whatever you did last week with your set of plays to open each half, do it again. Like, come out with the quick starts and play your game. I thought in week 1 against the 49ers, I don't know if it's because he felt like Kyle Shanahan knew everything that he was going to try to do. He just wasn't Clint Kubiak. Like, he was trying to run a bunch of single back stuff, few double tight end sets, one play action pass the entire game. Like, it didn't even feel like Clint Kubiak was calling the game. This past week, he got back to what he believes in. He got back to his philosophy. They got their wide zone going, had some split zone as well to get Ken Walker to third going. You got to have fast starts. So whatever was working on those scheduled plays, that needs to happen again this week. Come out and set the tone early. And then on defense, make Spencer Rattler's life miserable with interior pressure and edge pressure. The edge has been less consistent to this point.
Sure.
It feels like Boye Mafe and those guys are eventually going to start really getting after QBs, in part because of what Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy and Jaron Reed are doing in the middle. But to me, if they can do those two things, if they can get off to a quick start, avoid the early turnovers that have dogged them here in this early part of the season, and defensively, to me, it's just playing their game. Get that front four. They're the best in the NFL right now at turning up pressure with 4-man rushes. Keep that going this week. Let your back defenders in the secondary and linebacker make their plays in coverage with the ball getting out quickly. If you're not getting sacks, it's getting the ball out fast and create turnovers, which they have been doing in bunches here the first 2 weeks. Feels like if they do those two things as the favorite going into this game, that they can make life tough on the Saints. If they're not able to do those things, though, and the Saints hang around, as we've seen, Lumen Field, they've let teams hang around, and then teams have escaped with victories, which makes it interesting considering that the Seahawks are 7-point favorites going into this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I see this game shaking out, I think Seattle wins this game handily. I just think Seattle is in a different class right now than where the Saints are, and that's okay. Saints are just in a different part of their life cycle right now, starting their upward trajectory. So I've got Seattle winning this game 27-17 pretty decisively here. There's a chance that the Saints still find a way to impress individually, perhaps, whatever that might be, but I don't expect them to go to Lumen Field and steal one. And if they do, I think it will be a surprise of all surprises. You're going to see a lot of Saints fans feeling pretty good about where the Saints are headed after that.
Ross has it covered at Locked On Saints, and Corbin has it covered at Locked On Seahawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Couple of big-time teams playing in the prime time slate. You got Sunday night, you got Monday night. We're going to break that all down coming up on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. This episode is brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home, whether it's the local sports bar packed on game days, the coffee shop that knows your order by heart, or the corner deli that's been serving your community for decades. These are the places that bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. And there's a local spot here in Baltimore in the Fed Hill neighborhood, Be More Licks at Fed Hill, that comes alive every Sunday during football season. Fed Hill is absolutely rocking when the Ravens play. Everyone's in team colors. The energy is incredible. It feels like the entire place is there cheering together, which is absolutely incredible. And the local spots, they're what makes the neighborhood feel like home. And so many of them run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/LockedOnNFL to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show rolls on as we have covered the 1 p.m. slate of games, the 4 o'clock slate of games. Now we have the primetime matchup. Starting off on Sunday night, it's the 0-2 Giants against the 0-2 Chiefs. That Chiefs team needs a win in the worst way. And so you have Chris Clark and Ryan Tracy of Locked On Chiefs. You have Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants. They talk about what each team needs to do to get their first win of the season.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Chiefs. We've got Ryan Tracy and Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, myself, Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants. And gentlemen, it's time to talk about keys to the game. And I would like to start, if you wouldn't mind, on this one, because it's a big problem for the Giants. And it's potentially, I think, could be a get-right situation for the Giants. And that is the red zone production. The Giants are something like 1-7 in the red zone. The Chiefs, I believe, are tied for 20th in the league in their red zone defense. So if we could start there, I mean, from the Giants' perspective, I think the play calling has been part of the problem. They've called way too many wide plays that take forever to develop, which allows the defense to get caught up. But I'd like to hear from you as far as what you think has been the problem with the Chiefs' red zone defense.
It's tough, and I think part of it is you go back and you look at who they played. I think the Chargers didn't really get in the red zone a ton. They got in there enough to score points, but then you go up against the Eagles, and the Eagles have the tush push, and it's really hard to look at that scenario and just feel like the Chiefs are going to stop that. I mean, most NFL teams are not going to stop the tush push when they get in the red zone, and it's a close situation. So I do think it's partially who they played, but the Chiefs defense also didn't play well the first week of the season. And when your defense is out of sorts, and when you lose contain on a play where it's obvious you have to be able to contain the quarterback, and you're just not hitting your fits right, that is what causes you issues, especially in the red zone, where you talk about running things outside, but if you talk about running things inside, it's the angles that get you to the red zone or the end zone the quickest, and that's what causes issues. You don't hit your spot right. You don't hit your hole that you're supposed to be defending, and it turns into a big play. That happened against Saquon Barkley and the Eagles as well.
It is tough when you are a team that is built to defend the pass rather than the run, and you happen to get the Chargers and Eagles in back-to-back weeks. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that it's misrepresenting what they're capable of, but it's certainly week one, the lack of preparation showed its face. And now I think they see this as a get-right game, particularly between the tackles. To be able to attack that line of scrimmage, I think they're going to try to put that into play. But again, they are susceptible to some play action. We've seen a couple of bigger chunk plays come from that type of maneuver. So it is still questionable and a gelling defense in terms of what happens down low. Now, the opposite, unfortunately, is true as well. The one turnover that has cost them a ball game came when the offense was in the red zone as well. And of all things, to Mahomes, to Kelsey, turns into a game-changing play. As long as they can avoid that, I think the opposite will be able to hold true and they'll be able to put up points. They have to make sure that they hold the ball. And one of the things that I'm always interested in and what I want to know from you is how much is the key for limiting Russell? Is he now feel like he's back? Is there something that they need to do in order to take some of that away so that he in particular, but even if they bring in Dart, who I have a whole different theory on, in the red zone in particular, is there something that they can do to cause extra frustration or confusion for Wilson himself?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing, and we kind of saw it last week in overtime on that interception, that backbreaking interception, create congestion. Russell Wilson's what, 5'10"? I think that's what he's listed. I think he's a little shorter than that because I've stood next to him, and I think I'm a little taller than he is. But you know, with all his gear on, maybe he's taller than me. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, cause congestion so that he can't see, and if he can't see, he can't adjust to maybe what's going on down the field or in the end zone or anything like that. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. And you know, you guys mentioned Jackson Dart. The Giants do have a package for Jackson Dart in the red zone. He was practicing. Matter of fact, he was working on some of that stuff today at the end of practice. And it's just a matter of time before they bring out some of that stuff and see if they can't, you know, catch the opponent off guard. Because look, when you have Jackson Dart in there, he moves a little bit better than Russell does at this point in Russell's career. So now you've got to account for Jackson Dart's legs. Whereas with Russell, you know, Russell can move around if you need him to, but he's not going to scare anybody, I think, with his legs.
That's
a huge thing. You talk about
here. Sorry, Chris.
No, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
I love Dart's game, and I'm upset that they have to defend him so early in this season. So that's my piece.
All right, guys, real quick, let me get your key to the game. We talked about the red zone. I mean, do you agree, or is there something else?
I look at this game, and to me, it's a game where you have to get Mahomes going, and you have to get him going early, and you need to be putting in Mahomes and Reed need to be on the same page from probably the first day of practice this week. They need to go in, get in a room together, and figure out these are the plays that I feel extremely comfortable with, and the script needs to come from that. You need to have bread and butter plays that can get Mahomes going early in the game because the offense has to be productive early on. Because the reality of what you're seeing with this Chiefs offense is the consistency just isn't there. They haven't been able to make the play the one time, like every time last season that they needed just one play, it seemed like they found a way to get it done. It may not happen on first down. It may not happen on second down. Sometimes it happened on fourth down, but they found a way to get the one play to get them in the position to where they could win the game. This year, they can't do that. And it starts with them not being able to function well as an offense early in the game. And they need to put up points in the first quarter and maybe even get off to a lead against the Giants so the offense can actually feel like they're going in the right direction.
All right. So, guys want to make a prediction? 0-2. Who breaks it?
Go ahead, Ryan.
I'm going to say the Chiefs. I need the
Well,
Giants.
you're not alone, and I thank you because I have to agree with you.
Just in case you were afraid of hurting my feelings.
I don't want to, but I have to admit, if it was before last week, I would have been more adamant. But given that the sparks in the life that the Giants offense in particular showed, I'm a big fan of Scadaboo as well. So I'd like to see him stay on the sideline because that kid will make plays. I'll tell you that. So I do think it may be more competitive than a lot of people think. I have this as a 3-point game, and maybe it's a lead that then gets chopped down, but I don't think it's going to end up being an absolute blowout or anything along those lines. I have the Chiefs winning by 3.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are going to get the first victory in this one, and I think it's going to be a little bit more of a wider game, maybe a 7-point game, a touchdown win for the Chiefs. But I do think that this could go down to the wire, and I absolutely hate that. But just watching the Chiefs play over the past 2 seasons, that's how they've been playing. It's always a close game, and even if they are the better team, it's always a close game. So I don't like that, but that's kind of the way it's been.
I'm just hoping for a competitive game. I don't want to see a blowout. Nothing worse than a blowout. And the Giants just haven't done well on the primetime stage. I don't know what the reason is. I think they've lost now, I want to say 3 in a row on Sunday Night Football. So I just want a competitive game. I mean, if they lose, make it one score. If it's 7 or less, I'd be happy with that. Obviously, I'd be happy with a win. An upset win would be nice. But, I, like I said, I've got concerns about the middle of the defense and how they're going to hold up against Kelsey and Mahomes, that connection there. So going to be a good one, guys. It's going to be a raise the roof type of night, Giants home opener. Sunday Night Football, there's going to be lights. I think they're handing out lights for the game to those who are attending.
Check out Ryan and Chris over at Locked On Chiefs. Check out Patricia over at Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding it out, Monday Night Football, the Baltimore Ravens and the Detroit Lions. Baltimore is at 1-1. They're looking to pick up a big second win. Meanwhile, Detroit, they're a team that tale of 2 weeks for them. They're also 1-1, but it's looked very different in each of those 2 weeks. So Matt Derry of Locked On Lions and myself, Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens, we take you through everything you need to know leading up to the big Monday night matchup. Moving along on Locked On Ravens and Locked On Lions, Kevin Ostreicher and Matt Derry still diving into all the content and coverage you need leading up to Monday Night Football. Baltimore and Detroit facing off in a big Week 3 matchup. Matt, there are a lot of ways both these teams can win this game, whether it comes to doing the right thing or exposing the other team for doing the wrong thing. There are multiple different paths. What is your clearest path to victory for the Lions in this one?
I'll tell you what, Kev, I truly believe the Lions have got to get at least one takeaway in this game. I think that is the biggest thing. They did not have any in week 1. And I know I'm playing a lot of week 1, week 2 roulette here, but in all honesty, Dan Campbell's been talking about it going back to the preseason. Even in preseason games, he was like, got to get a takeaway. Didn't get a takeaway in this game. Lions got to find a way, whether it's a fumble recovery, an interception, switching the field over a little bit and getting their offense in a good position. I think might not be winning the turnover battle, even if it's even, but getting a takeaway that can lead to points, can quiet the crowd and just calm kind of the Lions down, I think is going to be key in this game, whether it's Branch, whether it's Kirby Joseph. These guys are ball hawks, maybe DJ Reed. I think that's going to be a big time key for this team. The other thing, and I said it earlier, is protecting Jared Goff. We talk about the Lions run game all the time. Gibbs and Montgomery are so good, and that sets the tempo and the tone for that play action passing game. But Ravens come at you. They're so physical. I have so much respect for what they've done for so many years, having that identity of being tough and defensive minded and after the quarterback. And now you got Roquan Smith there. I mean, that's almost, probably born to be a Raven. But if they don't protect Jared Goff, it could be a long night. So making sure he's clean and getting a takeaway, maybe 1 or 2 would be pretty big for this Lions team on the road. Not gonna be easy.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for both teams. I'm in agreement with you, Matt. Turnovers are the key to the game here. Before I get into mine, I do want to remind everyone that this Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. You can download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Now, I want to highlight the third down offense for both these teams because stat-wise, they have not been great, either of them, on third down. Lions ranked 23rd at 36%. Ravens not that far ahead at 21 with 39.1. And again, there's context in that. How quickly are you scoring? Is it a short drive that happens on a first down? You're not even hitting third down. That's something. But I know that both these teams have had, for the Lions case, you mentioned the week 1 and week 2. For the Ravens, it was a tale of 2 different offenses as well, despite the fact that they still put up 40 points in back-to-back games. But I'm also curious about the red zone for both these teams. The Ravens are one of the worst red zone defenses in the league right now, giving up conversion on 77.8% of their drives. Lions are 24th on defense in the red zone at 71.4%. And again, we're early enough in the season where those numbers will flesh themselves out over the course of the next couple of weeks. It's like almost saying, the week 1, the Ravens were 1 for 3 in the red zone. That's a very small sample size. So I think as those stats flesh themselves out over the course of the next, 2, 3, 4 weeks, we'll get a better idea of where those teams stand there. But the point remains where one of the best things the Ravens can do against a high-powered, potent offense that has guys like Jared Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Ross St. Brown, just keep them on the sideline. Force quick 3-and-outs. Don't let them win the time of possession battle. Don't let them touch the football. I mean, that's the thing that I think you have to do against these talented offenses. It's like the one way that you can guarantee they don't hurt you is when they don't have the ball in their hands and you keep them on the sideline. So that, to me, I think is the biggest path for the Ravens, is they tire the Lions defense out. And the Ravens offense, this isn't like the Greg Roman days where they're ripping off 11, 12, 13-minute drives every single time down the field. But even though they're more efficient, if Lamar, Derrick Henry, and the rest of the guys on offense can keep the ball out of Jared Goff's hands and the Ravens defense can continue to force them off the field, that to me is, I think, the biggest way the Ravens can get the job done here.
Gosh, it took us 27 minutes to mention Derrick Henry. What is wrong with us, Kev?
Man,
God, he's good. I mean, I know he had the fumble against Buffalo. I love what he said after the game. Put it on me. Man, what a weapon there to go with Lamar. And it's gonna be a tough task for the Lions defense. I like where they are right now and how they played this past week again, but that's Caleb Williams, the Bears. This is a different, certainly a different beast this week. So we'll see where it goes. I don't know. I mean, should I have some fun and pick the Lions and say 34-33 on a Jake Bates field goal? Lions have played so well on the road. I know they had their first road loss in 2 years in week 1 in Green Bay, but these type of road games last year, they went in and won, whether it was playing a really bad first half on a Sunday night game against Houston and coming back and winning that one. Maybe a late Bates field goal and the Lions get 2 wins in a row. What do you see?
Man, this one could go either way. The Ravens, they get up for these primetime games, and not only do the Ravens get up for primetime games, but Lamar Jackson gets up for games against NFC opponents. He's 24-2, over the course of his career against NFC teams. Obviously, that does include that few games against the Lions here where Lamar was able to get the best of that Detroit team. But again, it's 2 different teams right now. The Ravens roster, this is the best roster, in my opinion, that the Ravens have had in the Lamar Jackson era. Obviously, Detroit has continued to flesh out their team and continue to address weaknesses and improve. I'm going to pick the Ravens. I'm going to go 32-29, and I'm going to say Tyler Loop breaks the tie with a field goal. That's what beginning of the show. I'm like, hey, maybe it does come down to special teams. And it seems like both you and I are in agreement on that. So I'm expecting a really good game. I think that this is the game of the week, in my opinion. And, in my opinion, I think it'll live up to the billing for sure. You can find me and support me over at Locked On Ravens. You can find Matt and support Matt over at Locked On Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy football. Enjoy your weekends. And, of course, be sure you tap in with all of our local experts across our network to have the best breakdowns imaginable, your team every day over here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So we'll be back here soon on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Thanks for tuning in. See you right back here later.